They called her weak. They laughed when she flinched at the sound of hooves. But when the most violent horse on the ranch broke loose and threatened to kill a child, Elena Mercer stopped running from the past that had nearly destroyed her. In one brutal moment, she revealed the truth she'd buried for years, and made every man who doubted her choke on their words. This is the story of a woman who lost everything, a broken family that needed saving, and the wild frontier that gave them all one last chance. If you want to see how far survival can take someone when they finally stop hiding, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The stagecoach rattled into Black Hollow just after noon, kicking up enough dust to choke the handful of people standing along the crooked main street. Elena Mercer climbed down with shaking legs, gripping the side rail harder than she needed to. The driver tossed her single canvas bag into the dirt without looking at her. She didn't pick it up right away. She just stood there, squinting against the harsh sunlight, trying to figure out if this place was salvation or just another kind of hell. Black Hollow wasn't much, a row of wooden buildings sagging under their own weight. A saloon with broken shutters. A general store that looked like it had been patched together from whatever lumber didn't burn in some forgotten fire. Beyond the town, the land stretched flat and merciless in every direction, broken only by distant ridges that shimmered in the heat. It was the kind of place people came to disappear. That suited Elena just fine. She bent down and grabbed her bag, slinging it over her shoulder. Her ribs still ached from where her father had kicked her 3 weeks ago, back in a town she'd never see again. The bruises had faded to a sickly yellow-green, but the memory hadn't. It never did. A woman in a faded blue dress walked past without acknowledging her. 2 men standing outside the saloon stared openly, their eyes traveling from her worn boots to the loose braid hanging over her shoulder. One of them spat into the dirt. Elena kept her gaze straight ahead and started walking. She'd been told to find the boarding house. Mrs. Talbot ran it, the ticket agent back in Carson City had said. She'd find work there, maybe. If she was lucky. If Mrs. Talbot didn't ask too many questions. The boarding house sat at the far end of town, a narrow 2-story building with peeling white paint and a crooked porch. Elena knocked twice. The door opened almost immediately, and a short, sharp-faced woman looked her up and down with the kind of expression people reserved for stray dogs. "Help you?" "I'm looking for work," Elena said. Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. "I was told Mrs. Talbot might—" "I'm Mrs. Talbot. You got references?" Elena hesitated. "No, ma'am." "Family?" "No." "Money?" Elena's silence answered that one. Mrs. Talbot sighed through her nose. "Can you cook?" "Yes." "Sew?" "A little." "Clean?" "Yes, ma'am." Mrs. Talbot looked her over again, slower this time. "You running from something?" Elena's throat tightened. "Just looking for a fresh start." "That's what they all say." Mrs. Talbot stepped back and opened the door wider. "Come in. Don't track mud." The inside of the boarding house smelled like lye soap and old wood. The front room was small and cramped, with mismatched furniture and a braided rug that had seen better days. Mrs. Talbot led her through to the kitchen, where a pot of something gray and unappetizing bubbled on the stove. "I got 4 boarders right now," Mrs. Talbot said, stirring the pot without looking at Elena. "Minors, mostly. They eat like animals and smell worse. You'll cook breakfast and supper, wash their sheets once a week, and keep the common areas clean. You get a room upstairs and 2 meals a day. No pay for the first month. After that, we'll see." Elena swallowed. "That's fine." "Good. You start tomorrow." Mrs. Talbot finally looked at her. "One more thing. You get into trouble, you're out. I don't care what kind, understood?" "Yes, ma'am." "Go on upstairs. Last door on the left. Don't expect much." The room was barely big enough for the narrow bed and wooden crate that served as a table. The single window looked out over the empty street. Elena set her bag on the floor and sat down on the mattress, which sagged under her weight and smelled faintly of mildew. She pressed her palms against her knees and told herself this was better than what she'd left behind. It had to be. She lasted 3 days. Mrs. Talbot's boarders were exactly as described, loud, filthy, and perpetually drunk. One of them cornered her in the hallway on the second night, pressing her against the wall with breath that reeked of whiskey. She'd shoved him hard enough to send him stumbling, then locked herself in her room until morning. Mrs. Talbot had noticed the way Elena avoided the man after that, and her expression had turned cold. "You causing problems already?" she'd asked. Elena hadn't answered. On the third day, Mrs. Talbot caught her sneaking an extra biscuit from the kitchen. It was meant for later, when her stomach stopped cramping from hunger, but Mrs. Talbot had looked at her like she'd stolen gold. "Thieves don't last long here," she'd said flatly. "Pack your things. You're done." Elena had tried to explain, tried to apologize. But Mrs. Talbot had already turned away, stirring another pot of gray slop, and Elena knew better than to beg. She'd packed her bag in silence and left without looking back. Now she stood in the middle of Black Hollow's main street with nowhere to go and no idea what came next. The sun had started its slow descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of burnt orange and deep red. A few people moved along the boardwalks, but none of them looked at her. She was invisible here. Just another ghost drifting through a town full of them. She thought about the money she didn't have, the family she'd left behind, the bruises that still hadn't fully healed. And for a moment, standing there in the dust with the wind tugging at her skirt, she wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. Then she heard the voice. "You the girl looking for work?" Elena turned. A man stood a few feet away, tall and weather-beaten, with a wide-brimmed hat pulled low over his eyes. He had the look of someone who spent most of his life outdoors, sun-darkened skin, rough hands, boots caked with dried mud. He didn't smile. "I was," Elena said carefully. "Not anymore." "Talbot threw you out? News travels fast." The man shrugged. "Small town. You got any experience with ranch work?" Elena's stomach twisted. "Not really." "Can you cook? Clean? Follow orders without complaining?" "Yes." "You afraid of hard work?" "No." The man studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Wade Callahan's looking for help out at his place. Needs someone to handle the house, cook for the hands, maybe help with his daughter. It's rough work, long hours. You don't pay much, but you get room and board." Elena's pulse quickened. "Where's the ranch?" "About an hour's ride west. Callahan don't come into town much, keeps to himself." The man paused. "Folks say he's hard to work for, cold. Don't talk unless he has to. Last woman who worked for him quit after 2 weeks." "Why?" "Didn't say, just left." The man tilted his head. "You interested or not?" Elena thought about her other options. There weren't any. "I'm interested." "Good. Be at the livery stable at dawn tomorrow. Someone will take you out there." He started to walk away, then stopped. "One more thing. Don't expect Callahan to be friendly. He ain't." "I don't need friendly," Elena said quietly. "I just need work." The man nodded once and disappeared down the street. Elena stood there until the sun finally dropped below the horizon, leaving the sky bruised purple and black. Then she walked to the edge of town, found a sheltered spot behind the general store, and curled up with her bag as a pillow. She didn't sleep much. The ground was hard and cold, and every sound made her flinch. But she'd survived worse. And tomorrow, she'd have a roof over her head again. She just had to make it through one more night. Dawn came too fast. Elena woke with stiff muscles and a dry mouth, brushing dirt from her skirt as she made her way to the livery stable. A young man with shaggy hair and a crooked grin was waiting beside a wagon hitched to 2 sturdy horses. "You the new girl?" he asked. "I guess. Name's Tommy. Hop in. It's a bit of a ride." Elena climbed into the back of the wagon, settling herself among crates of supplies and sacks of grain. Tommy clicked his tongue at the horses, and they lurched forward, leaving Black Hollow behind in a cloud of dust. The land stretched endlessly in every direction. Flat prairie gave way to rolling hills dotted with scrub brush and the occasional cluster of cottonwood trees. The air smelled like dry grass and sun-baked earth. Tommy hummed tunelessly to himself, occasionally glancing back at her but not saying much. Elena was grateful for the silence. After what felt like hours, the landscape began to change. The hills grew steeper, and the grass gave way to rocky terrain. In the distance, Elena could make out a cluster of buildings nestled against the base of a ridge. As they drew closer, she saw a large ranch house, a barn, several corrals, and a bunkhouse that looked like it had been patched together from scrap wood. "That's the Callahan place," Tommy said, jerking his thumb toward the ranch. "Welcome to the middle of nowhere." Elena stared at the ranch as they approached. It looked isolated, harsh, like the kind of place where people came to be forgotten. She felt a strange kinship with it. Tommy pulled the wagon to a stop near the barn. "Wait here. I'll find the boss." He hopped down and disappeared into the barn, leaving Elena sitting in the back of the wagon with her bag clutched in her lap. She could hear men's voices drifting from somewhere nearby, the low murmur of conversation punctuated by the occasional burst of laughter. Horses stamped and snorted in the corrals. The air smelled like hay and manure. Then the barn door opened and a man stepped out. Elena knew immediately that this was Wade Callahan. He moved with the kind of quiet authority that didn't need announcing. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair streaked with gray at the temples. His face was all hard angles, sharp jawline, deep-set eyes, a mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. He wore a dusty work shirt rolled up to the elbows and pants stained with dirt and sweat. He looked tired. Not the kind of tired that came from a long day's work, but the deeper kind. The kind that lived in a person's bones. He stopped a few feet up from the wagon and looked at her. His gaze was flat and assessing, like he was sizing up livestock. "You the one looking for work?" His voice was rough, low. "Yes, sir." "What's your name?" "Elena Mercer." "You got experience?" Elena hesitated. "I can cook and clean. I'm a hard worker." "That's not what I asked." "No," she admitted. "I don't have ranch experience." Wade's expression didn't change. "You ever worked with livestock?" "No." "Horses?" Elena's chest tightened. "No." "You afraid of them?" She forced herself to nod. "A little." Wade stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned and started walking toward the house. "Come on!" Elena scrambled out of the wagon and grabbed her bag, hurrying to keep up. Wade moved fast, his long strides eating up the ground. He didn't look back to see if she was following. The ranch house was larger up close than it had seemed from a distance. 2 stories with a wide porch that wrapped around the front. The wood was weathered but sturdy, and the windows were clean. Wade pushed open the front door without knocking. Inside the house was dim and quiet. The front room had a stone fireplace, a worn sofa, and a few chairs. Everything was neat but sparse, like no one had bothered to make it feel like a home. A staircase led to the second floor, and a narrow hallway stretched toward the back of the house. Wade stopped in the middle of the room and turned to face her. "You'll sleep upstairs. Second door on the right. You'll cook 3 meals a day for the hands and keep the house clean. Laundry once a week. My daughter needs someone to look after her during the day. She don't talk much. Don't push her." Elena nodded, trying to keep up. "How old is she?" 6. "What's her name?" "Maisie." Wade crossed his arms. "You'll work sunrise to sundown. You get Sundays off if the work's done. Room and board, plus $20 a month. You cause trouble, you're gone. You steal, you're gone. You can't handle the work, you're gone. Clear?" "Yes, sir." "Good. Tommy'll bring your things up. Supper's at 6. Don't be late." He turned and walked out before Elena could say anything else. She stood there in the middle of the empty room, listening to the sound of his boots on the porch, and tried to ignore the tight knot forming in her stomach. This place felt wrong. Too quiet. Too heavy with something she couldn't name. But she didn't have anywhere else to go. Tommy appeared a moment later, grinning like nothing was wrong. "Boss ain't much for conversation, huh?" "No," Elena said faintly. "You'll get used to it. Come on, I'll show you your room." The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out over the corrals. Tommy set her bag on the bed and gave her a quick tour of the house. Kitchen, pantry, washroom, Maisie's room at the end of the hall. The little girl's door was closed. "She in there?" Elena asked. "Probably. She don't come out much." Tommy lowered his voice. "Her mama died a few years back. She ain't been the same since, neither has the boss." Elena looked at the closed door and felt something twist in her chest. "What happened?" Tommy shrugged. "Don't know the whole story. Folks don't talk about it much. All I know is Wade Callahan used to be different. Now he's just—" He trailed off, searching for the word. "Empty." Elena nodded slowly. She understood empty. Tommy left her to get settled, and Elena sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall. The house was so quiet she could hear her own heartbeat. She thought about Wade's cold eyes and flat voice, about the little girl locked away in her room, about the way this place felt like it had forgotten how to breathe. She told herself she could do this. She'd survived worse. She could survive this too. At 6 o'clock, Elena made her way downstairs to the kitchen. She'd spent the afternoon scrubbing pots and taking inventory of the pantry, trying to piece together what kind of meals she could make with what was available. The kitchen was better stocked than she'd expected, but everything felt like it had been sitting unused for too long. The ranch hands started filing in just before sundown. There were 6 of them, all dusty and tired, their faces weathered from long days in the sun. They nodded at her but didn't say much, settling into chairs around the long wooden table. Wade came in last, taking a seat at the head of the table without looking at anyone. Elena served stew and biscuits, moving quietly between the stove and the table. The men ate in silence, shoveling food into their mouths like they hadn't eaten in days. Wade ate slowly, methodically, his gaze fixed on his plate. She was about to retreat to the kitchen when one of the hands spoke up. "You seen the boss's kid yet?" Elena shook her head. "Not yet. Don't expect much. Girl barely says a word." The man, Roy, she thought his name was, leaned back in his chair and grinned. Probably for the best. Easier that way. Something about his tone made Elena's skin crawl. She glanced at Wade, but his expression hadn't changed. He just kept eating. Roy noticed her looking. "You got a problem?" "No," Elena said quickly. "Good, because we don't need another woman around here causing trouble." One of the other hands elbowed Roy. "Shut up." Roy laughed. "I'm just saying." Wade set down his fork with enough force that the sound echoed through the room. The laughter died instantly. He looked at Roy, his expression as cold as stone. "That's enough." Roy held up his hands. "Just making conversation, boss." Wade didn't respond. He stood, pushed his chair back, and walked out without another word. The room stayed silent until the front door slammed shut. Roy muttered something under his breath and went back to eating. The other hands avoided Elena's gaze. She gathered the empty plates with shaking hands and retreated to the kitchen, where she scrubbed dishes until her fingers ached. When the house finally emptied and the hands had gone back to the bunkhouse, Elena climbed the stairs to her room. She was exhausted, but sleep felt impossible. She lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling, listening to the wind rattle the windows. Somewhere down the hall, she heard a soft sound. A whimper, maybe, or a sob. Elena sat up and swung her legs over the side of the bed. She hesitated, then stood and walked quietly down the hall. Maisie's door was still closed, but the sound was clearer now, definitely crying. Elena knocked softly. "Maisie?" The crying stopped. "Maisie, it's Elena. I'm the new housekeeper. Can I come in?" Silence. Elena waited, then turned the handle slowly. The door creaked open. The room was dark except for a sliver of moonlight coming through the window. Maisie sat on the floor in the corner, her knees pulled up to her chest. She was small for 6, with tangled dark hair and wide eyes that stared at Elena like she was something dangerous. Elena knelt down a few feet away, keeping her movement slow. "Hey, you okay?" Maisie didn't answer. "It's all right," Elena said gently. "You don't have to talk if you don't want to." The little girl watched her warily. Her face was streaked with tears. Elena sat down cross-legged on the floor, giving Maisie space. "I used to cry at night, too, when I was scared." Maisie's eyes flickered. "You know what helped?" Elena said. "Singing. My mama used to sing to me when I couldn't sleep. Want me to sing something for you?" Maisie didn't respond, but she didn't tell Elena to leave either. Elena started humming softly, an old lullaby her mother had sung years ago. The melody was simple, achingly familiar. She let it fill the silence, her voice low and steady. Slowly, Maisie's shoulders relaxed, her breathing evened out. She didn't smile, but the fear in her eyes softened just a little. Elena kept humming until Maisie's head drooped forward and her eyes fluttered closed. Then she stood carefully, pulled a blanket over the little girl's sleeping form, and slipped out of the room. In the hallway, she nearly ran into Wade. He stood in the shadows, his face unreadable. Elena's heart jumped into her throat. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I heard her crying. I didn't mean to—" Wade held up a hand, cutting her off. He looked past her at Maisie's door, then back at Elena. For a moment, she thought he was going to yell, to tell her to leave the girl alone. Instead, he just nodded once and walked away. Elena stood there in the dark hallway, her pulse still racing, and wondered what she'd just gotten herself into. The next morning, Elena woke before dawn and started breakfast. The ranch was already alive with activity, horses moving in the corrals, men shouting to each other, the sound of hammers and hooves. She cooked eggs and bacon and set out coffee, trying to stay out of the way as the hands filed in. Wade came in last again, his expression as hard as ever. He didn't acknowledge her. After breakfast, Tommy found her in the kitchen. "Boss wants you to bring lunch out to the north pasture around noon. I'll show you where." Elena nodded, already feeling the weight of the day pressing down on her. The morning passed in a blur of chores. She scrubbed floors, washed dishes, and did her best to organize the cluttered pantry. Around mid-morning, she heard footsteps on the stairs and turned to see Maisie standing in the doorway. The little girl wore a simple dress and bare feet. Her hair was still tangled, and she looked like she hadn't slept well. She stared at Elena without saying anything. "Good morning," Elena said gently. "You hungry?" Maisie nodded. Elena made her a plate of leftover biscuits and jam, setting it on the table. Maisie climbed into a chair and ate slowly, her gaze never leaving Elena. "You sleep okay?" Elena asked. Maisie shrugged. Elena sat down across from her. "You know, I didn't get to introduce myself properly last night. I'm Elena. I'm going to be helping your dad around the house for a while." Maisie's eyes dropped to her plate. "It's nice to meet you," Elena said. "Even if you don't feel like talking." Maisie glanced up briefly, then back down. Elena didn't push. She just sat there, keeping the little girl company while she ate. When Maisie finished, she slid off the chair and disappeared upstairs without a word. At noon, Elena packed a basket of food and followed Tommy out to the north pasture. The walk was longer than she'd expected, and by the time they reached the work site, she was sweating and out of breath. The hands were scattered across the field, mending fences and herding cattle. Wade stood near the edge of the pasture, watching the work with his arms crossed. Tommy waved at him. "Brought lunch, boss." Wade nodded and walked over. The hands gathered around, grabbing food from the basket and settling onto the ground to eat. Elena stayed off to the side, uncertain where she fit. Wade took a piece of bread and a chunk of cheese, eating while standing. He glanced at her once, his expression unreadable, then turned back to the work. Roy sauntered over, grinning. "Boss got himself a maid, huh?" Elena ignored him. "You ever worked on a ranch before?" Roy asked, his tone mocking. "You look like you'd faint if a cow looked at you wrong." One of the other hands laughed. "Leave her alone, Roy." "I'm just curious." Roy stepped closer, looking Elena up and down. "You scared of horses too? Or just useless in general?" Elena's face burned. She opened her mouth to respond, but Wade's voice cut through the air. "Roy." Roy turned, still grinning. "Yeah, boss?" "Get back to work." The grin faltered. "I was just... now." Roy's jaw tightened, but he walked away without another word. Wade didn't look at Elena. He just finished his food and went back to watching the men work. Elena stood there, her hands shaking, and told herself she wouldn't cry. Not here. Not in front of them. She made it back to the house before the tears came. That night, after the hands had eaten and the house had gone quiet, Elena sat on the porch and stared out at the dark prairie. The sky was full of stars, more than she'd ever seen back east. The air was cool and smelled like sage. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to see Wade standing in the doorway. "You did good today," he said quietly. Elena blinked. "What?" "The food, the work. You did good." She didn't know what to say. Wade stood there for a moment longer, then turned and went back inside. Elena sat alone on the porch until the cold drove her back to bed. The days began to blur together after that. Wake before dawn, cook breakfast, clean the house, watch Maisie, cook lunch, more cleaning, cook supper, collapse into bed, repeat. Elena learned the rhythms of the ranch, the sounds of the horses in the corrals, the shouts of the men, the way the wind picked up in the late afternoon. She learned which hands were friendly and which ones to avoid. She learned that Wade only spoke when necessary, and that Maisie's silence ran deeper than shyness. She also learned that Roy despised her. He found every opportunity to undermine her work, to mock her in front of the others, to make her feel small. He called her city girl and useless, and laughed when she struggled with tasks she'd never done before. The other hands didn't join in, but they didn't stop him either. Wade never intervened unless Roy pushed too far. And even then, his defense was cold and perfunctory, like he was protecting property rather than a person. But Maisie was different. Slowly, carefully, the little girl began to open up. She started following Elena around the house, watching her work with quiet curiosity. She began to speak, short, hesitant sentences at first, then longer ones. She asked questions. She smiled. Not often, but enough that Elena noticed. One afternoon, Maisie tugged on Elena's skirt. "Will you sing again?" Elena looked down at her. "Right now?" Maisie nodded. So Elena sang while she worked, her voice filling the empty house, and Maisie sat nearby, humming along. Wade noticed. He didn't say anything, but Elena caught him watching them sometimes. Standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. He'd stay for a moment, then walk away without a word. 3 weeks passed, and then everything changed. Elena was in the barn, gathering eggs from the hen house, when she heard the commotion. Shouting. Hooves pounding against the ground. She stepped outside and saw a crowd of ranch hands gathered near the main corral. In the center of the corral, a massive black horse was rearing and bucking, its eyes wild with panic. The animal was beautiful and terrifying, all muscle and fury. One of the hands was trying to calm it with a rope, but the horse lashed out, nearly trampling him. Wade stood outside the corral, his jaw tight. Roy was beside him, talking fast. "Thing's too dangerous," Roy was saying. "We should put it down before someone gets killed." "No," Wade said flatly. "Boss, be reasonable. That horse is going to hurt someone." "Then stay away from it." Roy's face darkened. "You can't keep a wild animal like that on this ranch." I said no. Roy looked like he wanted to argue, but Wade's expression shut him down. Instead, Roy turned and stalked off, muttering under his breath. Elena watched the horse. It was still thrashing, foam flecking its mouth. Its terror was palpable, raw. She recognized it immediately. She'd felt that same terror once. Without thinking, she started walking toward the corral. "Elena." She turned. Wade was looking at her, his brow furrowed. "Stay back." "It's scared," she said. "It's dangerous." "It's scared," she repeated, more firmly this time. Wade opened his mouth to argue, but Elena had already turned away. She climbed up onto the fence and looked down at the horse. It was still bucking, still wild, and then she started to hum. The same lullaby she'd sung to Maisie. Soft, steady, unflinching. The horse's ears flicked toward her. Its movement slowed just slightly. Elena kept humming. The corral went silent. The hands stared at her. Wade took a step forward, his hand outstretched like he was about to pull her back. But the horse stopped thrashing. It stood in the center of the corral, sides heaving, eyes locked on Elena. She kept humming, kept her gaze steady. And slowly, impossibly, the horse took a step toward her. Wade's voice was low and tense. "Elena, get down from there." She didn't move. The horse came closer, its nostrils flaring. Elena reached out her hand, palm open. The horse hesitated. Then it lowered its head and touched its nose to her palm. The entire ranch seemed to hold its breath. Elena stroked the horse's muzzle, still humming. The animal's breathing slowed. Its eyes softened. And for the first time in weeks, Elena felt something other than fear. She felt like herself again. When she finally climbed down from the fence, Wade was staring at her like he'd never seen her before. "Where did you learn to do that?" he asked. Elena looked at him, her heart still pounding. "I didn't." It was a lie, but it was the only answer she could give. Wade didn't ask again. He just stood there watching Elena like she'd grown a second head, his eyes narrowed and searching. The ranch hands had started to disperse, muttering to each other in low voices, casting glances back at her as they walked away. Only Roy remained near the corral, his arms crossed and his face twisted into something ugly. "Lucky," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Nothing but dumb luck." Elena didn't respond. She was still catching her breath, her hand tingling where the horse had touched her. The animal stood calm now, its head lowered, eyes half closed. She could feel Wade's gaze burning into the side of her face, but she didn't look at him. She couldn't, because if she did, he might see the truth she'd just barely managed to bury again. "Get back to the house," Wade said finally, his voice flat. Elena nodded and walked away before he could say anything else. Her hands shook the entire way back. She went straight to the kitchen and plunged them into the wash basin, scrubbing her palms until they turned red. The cold water helped, but it didn't stop the memories from flooding back. Her father's ranch, The horses she'd trained before everything fell apart. The beatings that came when she refused to break them the way he wanted. The day she'd finally run, bruised and bleeding, with nothing but the clothes on her back. She'd sworn she'd never touch a horse again. And yet the moment she'd seen that black stallion thrashing in the corral, terrified and wild, something inside her had cracked open. She'd recognized herself in that animal. And she couldn't just walk away, stupid, reckless, dangerous. But it had felt right. Elena? She spun around. Maisie stood in the doorway, her hair a tangled mess, her bare feet dusty. She was holding a small wooden horse, one of the few toys Elena had seen in the girl's room. "Hey," Elena said, forcing her voice steady. "What's that you got there?" Maisie looked down at the toy. "It's Clover." "Clover's a good name." The little girl walked closer, her eyes fixed on Elena's face. "You made Thunder stop being scared." Elena's throat tightened. "Thunder?" "The black horse. Papa says he's named Thunder because he sounds like a storm." Maisie tilted her head. "Were you scared?" "A little," Elena admitted. "But you did it anyway." "Yeah." Maisie considered this for a moment, then held out the wooden horse. "Clover wants you to have her, for being brave." Elena crouched down to Maisie's level. The toy was worn smooth from years of handling, the paint chipped in places. It was clearly precious. "I can't take Clover, sweetie. She's yours. But you need her more," Maisie said seriously, "so you won't be scared." Elena's chest ached. She took the wooden horse carefully, turning it over in her hands. "Thank you, Maisie. I'll take real good care of her." Maisie smiled, a rare, full smile that lit up her whole face. Then she turned and ran back upstairs, leaving Elena kneeling on the kitchen floor with a lump in her throat and a child's toy clutched in her hands. That night at supper, the tension was thick enough to choke on. The ranch hands ate in silence, their eyes darting between Elena and Wade. Roy sat at the far end of the table, his jaw working like he was chewing on something bitter. Wade didn't look at anyone. He just ate methodically, his face carved from stone. Elena served the food and retreated to the kitchen, where she could hear everything but didn't have to be seen. She'd learned quickly that invisibility was safer. "That was something today," one of the hands said quietly. "Never seen Thunder settle like that." "Beginner's luck," Roy muttered. "Didn't look like luck to me." "Then you're as stupid as she is." Roy's chair scraped against the floor. "Girl doesn't know a damn thing about horses. She said so herself." "Roy, shut up," another voice cut in. "Why? Because the boss has gone soft?" Roy's voice rose. "That horse should have been put down weeks ago. Now we got some city girl playing cowboy, thinking she can tame wild animals with a song. It's a joke." The room went silent, then Wade's voice, cold and final. "You got a problem with how I run my ranch?" "No, boss." "Then keep your mouth shut and eat." Elena heard Roy slam his fork down, followed by the sound of boots stomping toward the door. It banged shut behind him, hard enough to rattle the windows. She stood in the kitchen, gripping the edge of the counter, and wondered how long she could keep this up. How long before someone pushed hard enough that the truth spilled out. How long before Wade stopped protecting her and told her to leave. She was so tired of running, but she didn't know how to stop. The days that followed felt like walking on a knife's edge. Roy's hostility intensified. He found reasons to be near her whenever she left the house, his eyes following her movements with barely concealed contempt. He made comments just loud enough for her to hear, calling her useless, mocking the way she carried water from the well, laughing when she struggled with tasks she'd never done before. The other hands kept their distance, not unkind but not willing to cross Roy either. He'd been Wade's foreman for years, and his word carried weight even when Wade wasn't around. Elena learned to avoid him when she could. She kept her head down, did her work, and tried to disappear into the background. But it was hard. Harder than she'd expected. Because every time Roy sneered at her, every time he called her weak or worthless, it dragged up memories of her father's voice saying the same things. And those memories had teeth. Maisie became her refuge. The little girl had started talking more, asking questions, seeking Elena out throughout the day. She'd follow Elena around the house, chattering about small things. The birds she'd seen outside her window, the pictures in the book she was looking at, the game she'd invented with her wooden animals. "Do you think Thunder misses being wild?" Maisie asked one afternoon while Elena was kneading bread. "I don't know, sweetie. Maybe," Papa says some things can't be tamed. They're just born different. Elena's hand stilled. Your papa say that about thunder? Maisie nodded. And about Mama? The words hung in the air. Elena didn't know what to say to that. She went back to kneading the dough, her movements slower now. I miss her, Maisie said quietly. I know. Do you miss your mama? Elena's throat closed up. Yeah, I do. Maisie leaned against the table, watching Elena work. Papa doesn't talk about her anymore. I think it makes him too sad. Grief does that sometimes. What's grief? Elena paused, searching for words a 6-year-old would understand. It's the heavy feeling you get when someone you love isn't here anymore. Like carrying around something really big that you can't put down. Maisie thought about this. Is that why Papa doesn't smile? Maybe. Is that why you don't smile? Elena looked at the little girl, her chest tight. Maybe. Maisie reached out and touched Elena's flour-dusted hand. I think you should both try smiling more, even if it's hard. Elena managed a small smile then, despite everything. You're pretty smart, you know that? Maisie grinned and ran off to play, leaving Elena alone with her thoughts and the heavy truth of a child's wisdom. Wade remained distant. He spoke to Elena only when necessary, and even then his words were clipped and functional. But she'd started to notice things, the way he'd pause in doorways when she was singing to Maisie, the way his expression would soften just for a second before hardening again, the way he'd watch his daughter laugh at something Elena said, and something like pain would flash across his face. He was a man buried alive in his own grief, and Elena understood that more than she wanted to. One evening, nearly a month into her time at the ranch, Elena was outside hanging laundry when she heard hooves approaching. She turned to see Wade riding in from the far pasture, his horse lathered and breathing hard. He dismounted near the barn and handed the reins to Tommy, then started walking toward the house. He stopped when he saw Elena. For a long moment, he just stood there, dusty and tired, his hat shadowing his face. You did good with Maisie, he said finally. Elena blinked. Sir? She's talking again, laughing. I haven't heard her laugh in 2 years. His voice was rough, like the words were scraping their way out. So thank you. Before Elena could respond, he walked past her into the house. She stood there holding a wet sheet, her heart hammering, and realized that was the most Wade Callahan had ever said to her at once. It was also the closest thing to kindness she'd received since arriving. The next morning, Roy cornered her in the barn. Elena had come to collect eggs, same as every morning, but when she stepped inside the dim building, Roy was waiting. He was leaning against a post, arms crossed, that ugly smile plastered on his face. Morning, city girl. Elena's stomach dropped. Morning. She tried to move past him, but he shifted, blocking her path. You know what I think? Roy said conversationally. I think you're hiding something. I'm not. Sure you are. Nobody comes out here with nothing and no one unless they're running from something. He stepped closer. So what is it? You steal something? Kill someone? Or maybe you just got yourself in trouble with some man and had to run before he found you. Elena's hands clenched at her sides. Move. You think the boss is going to protect you forever? He won't. He's got enough problems without adding a lying woman to the list. I said move, Roy laughed, low and mean. Or what? You going to sing at me? Roy. They both turned. Wade stood in the barn doorway, backlit by the morning sun. His face was in shadow, but his voice was ice. Get out. Roy's smile faltered. Boss, I was just... Get out. Roy straightened, his jaw tight. He shot Elena a look of pure hatred, then walked past Wade without another word. Wade stepped into the barn. He looked at Elena, his expression unreadable. He bother you before? No, Elena lied. Wade didn't believe her. She could see it in his eyes, but he didn't push. He does. You tell me. Yes, sir. He nodded once and turned to leave. Then he stopped. That thing you did with thunder. Where'd you learn it? Elena's pulse spiked. I didn't learn it anywhere. I just tried something. That wasn't just trying something. That was skill. I got lucky. Wade turned back to face her fully, his eyes sharp. You afraid of horses or not? Elena held his gaze, willing herself not to flinch. I am. Then why'd you get up on that fence? Because he was scared. And I know what that feels like. Something shifted in Wade's expression. Not softness, exactly, but understanding. Like he'd heard something in her words that she hadn't meant to say. "You're a strange woman, Elena Mercer," he said quietly. "I know." He studied her for a moment longer, then walked away, leaving Elena alone in the barn with her racing heart and the weight of her own lies pressing down on her chest. She couldn't keep this up. She knew that. Eventually, someone would figure out the truth. Roy was already suspicious. Wade was asking questions. And the horses, the damned horses, kept drawing her in despite her best efforts to stay away. But where else could she go? What else could she do? So she swallowed the fear, picked up the egg basket, and went back to pretending she was someone she wasn't. And went back to 3 days later, Tommy asked her to bring lunch out to the south pasture where the men were working on a new section of fence. Elena packed the food, slung the heavy basket over her arm, and started the long walk across the ranch. The sun was brutal. By the time she reached the work site, sweat was running down her back and her arms ached. The hands were scattered across the field, digging post holes and stringing wire. Wade was near the tree line, talking to one of the men. Elena set the basket down in the shade and started unpacking. The hands drifted over, grabbing food and settling onto the ground. She was handing out canteens when she heard the commotion. Someone shouted. Then a horse screamed. Elena's head snapped up. At the far edge of the pasture, one of the mares had gotten tangled in loose wire. She was thrashing, eyes wild, blood streaking her legs where the wire had cut into her flesh. Two of the hands were trying to calm her, but the horse was in full panic, rearing and kicking. "Get back!" Wade was running toward the mare, his face tight. "She's going to hurt herself worse." The horse screamed again, a sound of pure terror. The wire was cutting deeper with every movement. If they didn't calm her soon, she'd tear herself apart. Elena's feet moved before her brain caught up. She dropped the canteen and ran toward the mare, ignoring the shouts behind her. "Elena, stop!" She didn't stop. She reached the horse and dropped to her knees beside the tangled wire, her hands already moving to assess the damage. The mare was still thrashing, but Elena started humming, low and steady, the same lullaby that had worked on Thunder. The horse's ear flicked toward her. Its movement slowed fractionally. "Easy," Elena murmured, her voice calm despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "Easy, girl. You're okay. I'm going to help you." She kept humming while her hands worked, carefully unwinding the wire from the mare's legs. The cuts were deep, but not fatal. The horse was still trembling, still scared, but it had stopped thrashing. Behind her, she could hear Wade's voice, sharp and commanding. "Nobody move. Let her work." Elena kept humming, kept her movements slow and deliberate. The mare's breathing began to even out, its muscles relaxing under Elena's hands. She unwound the last section of wire and tossed it aside, then ran her hands over the horse's legs, checking for breaks. "You're okay," she whispered. "See? You're okay." The mare lowered its head and pressed its nose against Elena's shoulder. Elena's breath hitched. She wrapped her arms around the horse's neck and held on, her eyes stinging. When she finally stood and turned around, the entire crew was staring at her. Wade stood at the front, his face unreadable. Roy was behind him, his expression somewhere between furious and triumphant. "Well," Roy said slowly, "that sure didn't look like someone who's afraid of horses." The words dropped like stones into still water. Elena's stomach turned to ice. Wade's eyes were locked on her, cold and assessing. "You lied." It wasn't a question. Elena opened her mouth, but nothing came out. What could she say? There was no explanation that didn't involve the truth, and the truth was a door she couldn't open. "I asked you if you had experience with horses," Wade said, his voice dangerously quiet. "You said no." You looked me in the eye and lied." Roy laughed, harsh and bitter. "Told you she was hiding something, boss." Wade ignored him. He took a step toward Elena, his jaw tight. "What else have you lied about?" "Nothing," Elena said, her voice breaking. "I swear, nothing else." "Why should I believe you?" She didn't have an answer for that. Wade stared at her for a long moment, and Elena saw the exact second his expression closed off completely. Whatever small trust had been building between them shattered like glass. "Get back to the house," he said flatly. "We'll talk when I'm done here." Elena nodded and walked away on shaking legs. feeling the weight of every eye on her back. Roy's laughter followed her across the pasture, and she knew that everything was about to fall apart. By the time she reached the house, her hands were trembling so badly she could barely grip the door handle. She went straight to her room and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall. She should pack. She should leave before Wade came back and told her to get out. But where would she go? She had no money, no plan, no options. She was so tired of running, tired of lying, tired of being afraid. Maybe it was time to stop. Hours passed. The sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, painting the room in shades of orange and gold. Elena heard the hands return, their voices drifting up from below. She heard the clatter of dishes as someone started supper without her. She heard Maisie calling her name, and it broke her heart. Then she heard Wade's boots on the stairs. He knocked once, then opened the door without waiting for a response. He stood in the doorway, his face still hard, his eyes still cold. "Talk," he said. Elena took a shaky breath. "What do you want to know?" "Everything, starting with why you lied." She looked down at her hands, at the calluses and scars that told their own story. "Because I was afraid." "Of what?" "Of being sent away. Of not having anywhere else to go." She swallowed hard. "Of being found." Wade stepped into the room, his arms crossed. "Found by who?" "My father." The words tasted like ash. She hadn't spoken about him in months. Hadn't let herself think about the man who'd raised her with fists and fury, who'd beaten her every time she showed kindness to the horses he wanted broken, who told her she was worthless and weak and would never amount to anything. "He taught me to train horses," Elena said quietly. "When I was young, it was the only time he didn't hit me, because I was useful. But he wanted them broken, not trained. He'd beat them into submission, and if I tried to do it differently, he'd beat me too." Wade's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "I got good at it," Elena continued. "Real good. People started asking for me specifically, and that made him angry. Because I was doing it my way, not his. So he started coming after me harder. One night he kicked me so bad I couldn't walk for a week. When I could finally stand again, I ran, took nothing but the clothes on my back and kept running until I ended up here." She finally looked up at Wade. "I didn't lie about being afraid of horses. I am afraid. Not of them, but of what happens when people find out I'm good with them. Because every time someone figured it out back home, my father made me pay for it." Wade was quiet for a long time. Then he walked to the window and looked out at the darkening prairie. "You think he's looking for you?" he asked. "I don't know, maybe. He never liked losing things that belonged to him. You don't belong to anyone. Try telling him that." Wade turned back to face her, and for the first time since she'd met him, his expression softened just slightly. "You should have told me. Would you have hired me if I had?" He didn't answer, which was answer enough. Elena wiped at her eyes, angry at the tears that had started to fall. "I'm sorry I lied, but I needed this job. I needed a place to hide. And I thought if I could just keep my head down and stay invisible, maybe I'd finally be safe." "Safe," Wade repeated, like the word was foreign. "You know what Roy's going to do with this, right? He's already told half the hands. By tomorrow, the whole ranch will know you've been lying." "I know. And you know I can't keep you on after this. Can't have people thinking I tolerate dishonesty." Elena's heart cracked. "I know." Wade rubbed a hand over his face, looking suddenly exhausted. "I'll give you 2 weeks. That's enough time to figure out where you're going next. I'll pay you what I owe you, plus a little extra." "You don't have to—" 2 weeks, he repeated firmly. "After that, you're gone." He walked to the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, Maisie's gonna miss you." Then he left, closing the door quietly behind him. Elena sat alone in this growing darkness, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling in for the night. Maisie's laughter drifted up from downstairs, probably not knowing yet that Elena would be leaving. The hands were in the bunkhouse, no doubt talking about the crazy woman who'd lied her way onto the ranch. And somewhere out there in the vast, unforgiving frontier, her father might still be looking. 2 weeks. That's all she had. 2 weeks to figure out how to survive when she'd finally stopped running long enough to realize she had nothing left to run toward. She lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling until exhaustion pulled her under. But even in sleep, she couldn't escape. She dreamed of horses and wire, and her father's voice telling her she'd never be anything but broken. Morning came too fast and brought with it a silence that felt like judgment. Elena woke before dawn as always, but this time the routine felt hollow. She dressed in the dark, splashed water on her face, and made her way downstairs to start breakfast with the knowledge that every movement was being counted down. 14 days left. Then 13. Then nothing. The kitchen was cold. She built up the fire and started the coffee, her hands moving through motions that had become automatic. Outside, she could hear the ranch stirring to life. Horses nickering, men's voices calling to each other, the creak of the barn door. Normal sounds. But nothing felt normal anymore. The hands filed in for breakfast without looking at her. They took their seats, heads down, and ate in heavy silence. Roy came in last, his swagger more pronounced than usual, a smirk pulling at his mouth. He caught Elena's eye and raised his coffee cup in a mock salute. Wade didn't come to breakfast at all. After the men left, Elena stood at the sink scrubbing dishes and trying to figure out what she was supposed to do with the next 2 weeks. Keep working like nothing had changed. Start packing? Pretend she wasn't terrified of stepping back out into a world that had already chewed her up once? Elena? She turned. Maisie stood in the doorway, still in her nightgown, her hair a wild tangle around her face. Her eyes were red. "Hey, sweetie." Elena dried her hands and crouched down. "What's wrong?" "Papa says you're leaving." Maisie's voice cracked. "He said you have to go away." Elena's chest tightened. "Yeah, I have to go in a couple weeks." "Why?" "It's complicated." That's what grown-ups always say when they don't want to tell the truth. Tears spilled down Maisie's cheeks. "Did I do something wrong?" "No, baby, no." Elena pulled the little girl into her arms, holding her tight. "You didn't do anything wrong. This isn't about you at all." "Then why do you have to leave? Don't you like it here?" Elena closed her eyes, her throat burning. "I do like it here, more than I thought I would." "Then stay." "I can't." "Why not?" "Because your father doesn't trust liars. Because I don't belong anywhere. Because I'm poison and eventually I ruin everything I touch. Because sometimes things just don't work out the way we want them to." Maisie pulled back, her small face fierce despite the tears. "That's stupid." "I know. I don't want you to go." "I don't want to go either." They stayed like that for a long time, Elena holding the little girl while she cried, wishing she could promise something different. But promises were dangerous things, and Elena had learned not to make them. Eventually, Maisie's tears dried up. She wiped her face on Elena's apron and looked up with swollen eyes. "Can you at least stay until my birthday? It's in 12 days. 12 days. That was cutting it close to Wade's deadline. "I'll try, sweetie. I promise I'll try." Maisie nodded, then wandered back upstairs, looking smaller and lonelier than she had in weeks. Elena watched her go and felt something crack wider in her chest. She'd let herself care, let herself hope, and now she'd pay for it the same way she always did. The morning dragged on. Elena threw herself into work, scrubbing floors that didn't need scrubbing, reorganizing cupboards that were already organized. Anything to keep her hands busy and her mind from spiraling. But the silence of the house pressed down on her, and every creak of the floorboards made her jump. Around midday, she heard boots on the porch. She looked up from the stove just as Wade walked in. He stopped when he saw her, his hat in his hands, his expression unreadable. "Need you to look at the mare," he said without preamble. "The one from yesterday. Cuts are infected." Elena blinked. "You want me to—" "Tommy tried cleaning them this morning. Horse won't let him near her." Wade's jaw tightened. "Figured you might have better luck." It wasn't a request. Elena wiped her hands on her apron and followed him outside. The mare was in a small paddock behind the barn, favoring her front legs. Up close, Elena could see the cuts were angry and swollen, weeping clear fluid. The horse's ears were pinned back, and she shifted nervously as they approached. "She's been like this all morning," Wade said. "Won't eat, barely drinking. If those cuts don't get cleaned soon, she'll end up lame." Elena climbed over the fence and approached slowly, hands out, humming that same low melody. The mare's ears flicked forward, her nostrils flared, scenting the air. "Easy, girl," Elena murmured. "I know it hurts. I'm gonna make it better, okay? But you gotta let me." She kept humming, kept moving slowly, until she was close enough to touch. The mare trembled but didn't bolt. Elena ran her hand down the horse's neck, feeling the tension in the muscles, then carefully lifted the injured leg. The mare flinched but held still. Elena examined the cuts, her trained eye cataloging the damage. Not as bad as it could have been, but bad enough. She'd need hot water, clean cloths, and something to fight the infection. "You got any whiskey?" Wade nodded. "In the barn. Bring it, and clean rags, hot water if you can manage it." He left without argument. Elena stayed with the mare, running her hands over the horse's body, checking for other injuries, murmuring nonsense words that seemed to calm both of them. When Wade returned with the supplies, she set to work. The mare flinched when Elena poured the whiskey over the cuts, a high whine escaping her throat, but she didn't pull away. Elena worked quickly, cleaning the wounds, wrapping them in strips of clean cloth. The whole time, Wade stood at the fence watching, his arms crossed. When Elena finished, she patted the mare's shoulder. "There you go, you'll be okay now." The horse lowered her head and pressed her nose into Elena's chest, breathing deep. Elena wrapped her arms around the animal's neck and held on, her eyes stinging. "You're good at that," Wade said quietly. Elena didn't look at him. "My father taught me, before he decided beating things was easier than training them." Wade was silent for a moment. "Roy's been talking. I figured. Says you're probably a horse thief, that you lied because you're wanted somewhere." Elena laughed, a bitter sound. "I'm not a thief, just a coward. That's not what I saw yesterday." She finally turned to look at him. Wade was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Not anger. Something else. Something that made her chest ache. "I meant what I said last night," he continued. "You got 2 weeks, but in the meantime, I need help with the horses. Tommy's good with fence posts and cattle, but he's useless with anything that needs a gentle hand. If you're willing, I'll pay you extra." Elena stared at him. "You're asking me to train your horses? After I lied to you? I'm asking you to do the job you're actually qualified for instead of the one you've been pretending to do." Wade's jaw tightened. "You don't want to, say so. But that mare would be lame right now if you hadn't been here." Elena looked back at the horse, at the way she was standing calmer now, the tension draining from her body. She thought about Thunder in the corral, about Maisie's small hand in hers, about the strange pull she felt toward this broken place and the broken people in it. "Okay," she said quietly, "I'll do it." Wade nodded once. "Good. Start tomorrow." He walked away before she could say anything else, leaving Elena alone with the mare and a feeling she couldn't quite name. It wasn't hope. She'd learned better than to hope. But it was something that felt dangerously close to purpose. That night, Roy cornered her outside the barn. Elena had gone out to check on the mare one last time before bed, and he'd been waiting in the shadows. He stepped into her path, close enough that she could smell the whiskey on his breath. "Think you're real clever, don't you?" His voice was low and mean. "Got the boss eating out of your hand now." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you don't." Roy stepped closer. "You think I don't see what you're doing? Playing the poor helpless woman, making the little girl love you, working your way into Wade's good graces. It's pathetic." Elena's hands clenched at her sides. "Get out of my way." "Or what? You gonna run crying to the boss?" Roy laughed. "He might have given you a reprieve, but it won't last. I'll make sure of it." "Why do you even care? I'll be gone in 2 weeks anyway." "Because you don't belong here. This ranch doesn't need some lying woman stirring up trouble. It was running fine before you showed up, and it'll be fine after you leave." His eyes glittered in the dim light. "I'm going to make sure you remember that." Elena tried to step around him, but Roy grabbed her arm hard enough to bruise. "I'm not done. Let her go." They both turned. Wade stood a few feet away, his face carved from stone, his eyes cold as winter. Elena hadn't heard him approach. Roy's hand dropped from her arm. "Boss, I said let her go." Roy stepped back, his jaw tight with barely suppressed rage. "You're making a mistake protecting her." "That's my call to make, not yours. She's going to bring nothing but trouble. You know it same as I do." Wade took a step forward, and something in his posture made Roy go still. "You got something you want to say to me?" Roy's mouth worked like he was chewing on words he couldn't spit out. Finally, he shook his head. "No, boss." "Then get back to the bunkhouse. And stay away from Elena. That's an order." Roy's face flushed dark. He shot Elena a look of pure venom, then stalked off into the night. The sound of his boots faded into silence. Wade turned to Elena. You okay? Yeah. Her voice came out shaky. Thanks. You do this before? A few times. Nothing I couldn't handle. Wade's expression darkened. You should have told me. You had enough to worry about without adding my problems to the list. Your problems are my problems now. You work for me. That makes you my responsibility. He paused, then added more quietly, Maisie told me you promised to stay for her birthday. Elena's throat tightened. I said I'd try. I know I only have 2 weeks. Bull? But Bob, bull. Her birthday's in 12 days. Stay for it. Wade looked away, his jaw working. She's already lost too much. Let her have this one thing. Okay. He nodded once, then walked back toward the house. Elena watched him go, her heart hammering, and wondered how everything had gotten so complicated so fast. The next morning, Elena started working with the horses. Wade set her up in a smaller corral away from the main barn, where she could work without the hands watching her every move. He brought Thunder out first, the black stallion that had started everything. The horse came willingly now, following Wade like a dog, but his eyes were still sharp and wary. He trusts you, Wade said, handing Elena the lead rope. Don't make me regret this. Elena took the rope and waited until Wade left before she started. She spent the first hour just standing with Thunder, letting him get used to her presence, humming that familiar melody. The horse's ears swiveled toward her, listening. His breathing slowed. After a while, he lowered his head and rested his nose against her shoulder. Yeah, Elena murmured, running her hand down his neck. I know how you feel. She worked with Thunder until midday, teaching him to respond to voice commands, to move with gentle pressure instead of force. It came back to her easily. The language of horses, the give and take, the mutual respect that her father had never understood. By the time she led Thunder back to his stall, the stallion was following her like they'd been partners for years. Wade was waiting outside the corral. He didn't say anything, just watched as Elena released Thunder and closed the gate. But something in his expression had shifted. The cold assessment was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like respect. Tomorrow, I want you to work with the new colt, he said. He's green, but smart. Needs someone patient. I can do that, Wade nodded. You eat lunch yet? No? Come on, I'll make you something. Elena followed him to the house, surprised. Wade Callahan didn't strike her as the type to make sandwiches, but he moved around the kitchen with surprising efficiency, slicing bread and cheese, pouring water from the pitcher. He set a plate in front of her and took a seat across the table. They ate in silence for a while. Then Wade said, Maisie told me what you said about your father. Elena's hand stilled on her cup. She wasn't supposed to. She's 6. She doesn't understand secrets yet. Wade studied her face. He really beat you? Yeah. And you still ran, even knowing he might come after you. Staying would have killed me eventually. Running at least gave me a chance. Wade was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, My wife used to say the same thing, that staying would kill her. Elena looked up sharply. Wade's face was tight, his eyes fixed on some point past her shoulder. She was restless, he continued, always wanting more than this place could give her. More excitement, more life. She'd disappear for days at a time, come back wild-eyed and manic, then crash into something dark I couldn't pull her out of. He paused. One night she took the wagon out during a storm. Said she couldn't breathe, couldn't stay another minute. The wagon overturned. By the time we found her, it was too late. Elena's chest ached. I'm sorry. Maisie saw it happen. She was with her mother. Barely made it out alive herself. Wade's voice was rough. Hasn't been the same since. Neither of us have. That's why she doesn't talk much. That's why she didn't talk at all. Until you. Wade finally looked at her. So yeah, I'm asking you to stay for her birthday, because for the first time in 2 years, my daughter is acting like a kid again, and I don't want to take that away from her before I have to. Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. They finished eating in silence, and when Elena stood to clear the plates, Wade caught her wrist gently. Thank you for what you're doing with Maisie and with the horses. You're paying me to do it. No, I'm paying you to survive. You're doing the rest because you want to. His grip tightened briefly, then released. That matters. He left before Elena could respond. She stood alone in the kitchen, staring at the empty doorway, and felt the crack in her chest widen a little more. The days blurred together after that. Elena spent mornings working with the horses and afternoons with Maisie. The little girl was a constant shadow now, following Elena everywhere, asking endless questions, slowly coming back to life. She laughed more, talked more, even started playing outside again instead of hiding in her room. The ranch hands noticed. They stopped avoiding Elena's gaze and started nodding greetings when she passed. A few even thanked her for working with the horses, said they'd noticed the animals were calmer, easier to handle. It felt like acceptance, and it terrified her because she knew it wouldn't last. Roy noticed too. His hostility grew sharper, more focused. He found excuses to be near her when Wade wasn't around, making comments loud enough for others to hear, saying she was bewitching the boss, that she had everyone fooled, that it was only a matter of time before her true nature showed, and she destroyed everything. Elena ignored him as best she could, but his words wormed their way under her skin, feeding the voice in her head that sounded too much like her father. You're worthless. You ruin everything. You don't deserve this. A week passed, then 8 days, then 10. 2 days before Maisie's birthday, Elena was in the corral working with the young colt when she heard shouting. She looked up to see a commotion near the main barn, hands running, someone yelling for Wade. Her stomach dropped. She secured the colt and ran toward the barn. A crowd had gathered near the large corral where they kept the semi-wild horses brought in from the range. Inside the corral, Thunder was loose, thrashing and bucking, his eyes rolling white. And in the center of the chaos, Maisie stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. Elena's blood turned to ice. "Maisie!" Thunder reared, hooves flashing dangerously close to the little girl's head. Maisie screamed. Elena didn't think. She vaulted the fence and ran straight into the corral, putting herself between Thunder and Maisie. The stallion's hooves came down inches from her head. She grabbed Maisie and shoved her toward the fence where Wade was already reaching over, his face white with terror. "Get her out!" Elena yelled. Wade grabbed his daughter and hauled her over the fence. Thunder spun toward Elena, nostrils flared, every muscle coiled to strike. The horse was beyond reason now, beyond anything but pure panic and rage. The ranch hands were shouting, some climbing the fence, others grabbing ropes. Roy was yelling for someone to get a rifle. "No!" Elena's voice cut through the chaos. "Everyone shut up and get back!" The shouting died. Thunder stood in the center of the corral, sides heaving, ready to bolt or attack. Elena held her ground, hands out, her heart slamming against her ribs. "Thunder," she said quietly. "Hey, look at me." The horse's ear twitched. "It's okay. Whatever scared you, it's over now." She took a slow step forward. "Remember me? Remember how I helped you before?" Thunder pawed the ground, head tossing. Elena kept moving, kept talking, her voice steady despite the adrenaline screaming through her veins. "You're not alone. I'm not going to hurt you. Nobody here is going to hurt you." She was close enough now that Thunder could strike if he wanted, close enough to die if she'd misjudged. But she kept her hands out, kept humming that lullaby, and prayed she wasn't about to get kicked to death in front of everyone. Thunder's breathing slowed, his head lowered fractionally. Elena reached out and placed her palm against his nose. "There you go, see? You're okay." The stallion leaned into her touch, some of the wildness draining from his eyes. Elena ran her other hand down his neck, feeling the tremors running through his body. She kept humming, kept touching, until Thunder's head dropped fully, and he pressed against her like a child seeking comfort. The corral was dead silent. Elena looked up and found Wade staring at her, his face a mixture of shock and something else she couldn't name. Maisie was sobbing in his arms. The hands were frozen, mouths open, and Roy looked like he'd swallowed glass. "Someone want to tell me how Thunder got loose?" Elena's voice was shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. "And how Maisie got in here?" Nobody answered. Elena looked at Roy and saw guilt flash across his face before he masked it. "Roy?" Wade's voice was deadly quiet. Roy's jaw tightened. The gate must not have been latched properly. The gate was fine this morning. I checked it myself." Wade handed Maisie to Tommy and climbed into the corral. His eyes were cold fire. What did you do? Nothing, boss. I swear. Don't lie to me. Roy's face flushed. I opened the gate to move some equipment. The horse must have slipped past me. It was an accident. And my daughter? Roy hesitated. She was playing nearby. Must have climbed in before I realized. Must have. Wade's voice could have cut stone. You left a dangerous horse loose in a corral where a 6-year-old was playing. Accident or not, that's unacceptable. Boss, I didn't mean, get off my ranch. The words dropped like a hammer. Roy's face went white. What? You heard me. Pack your things and get out. You're done here. You can't be serious. I've worked for you for 5 years. And in those 5 years, you've been nothing but trouble. Fighting with the hands, questioning my decisions, treating people like dirt because you think your position makes you better than them. Wade's hands clenched at his sides. My daughter could have died today because you were careless. I don't care if it was an accident. You're not welcome here anymore. Roy's face twisted with rage. He jabbed a finger at Elena. This is because of her, isn't it? You'd rather keep some lying woman who showed up out of nowhere than a man who's been loyal to you since... Loyal? Wade's laugh was sharp and humorless. You've spent the last month trying to run Elena off this ranch, harassing her, spreading rumors, making her life miserable because you couldn't stand that she was better with the horses than you'll ever be. He stepped closer to Roy, his voice dropping to something dangerous. That's not loyalty. That's jealousy, and I'm done with it. Get out, now. Roy looked around at the other hands, searching for support. Nobody met his eyes. His face went from white to red, and for a moment Elena thought he might take a swing at Wade. Instead, he spat at Elena's feet. You'll regret this. All of you. Then he turned and stormed off toward the bunkhouse. The silence that followed was crushing. Wade looked at Elena, still standing with Thunder, her hand on the horse's neck. You okay? Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. Wade turned to the hands. Get back to work. Show's over. They dispersed slowly, throwing glances back at Elena. Wade climbed out of the corral and took Maisie from Tommy, holding her tight. The little girl's face was buried in his shoulder, her small body still shaking. It's okay, baby, Wade murmured. You're okay. Elena saved you. Maisie lifted her head and looked at Elena with wide, tear-filled eyes. You stopped Thunder. You made him not be scared anymore. Elena managed a weak smile. Yeah, sweetie. He's okay now. Are you okay? Elena's throat closed up. I'm okay. But she wasn't. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to grip Thunder's mane to keep them still. Her knees felt like water. The full weight of what had just happened was crashing down on her, and she wanted nothing more than to collapse somewhere private and fall apart. Wade seemed to see it. Tommy, take Thunder back to his stall. Elena, come with me. Elena followed him to the house on numb legs. Wade set Maisie down and told her to go wash her face. Then he turned to Elena, and the careful mask he always wore cracked just slightly. Thank you, he said, his voice rough. If you hadn't been here, don't. Elena shook her head. Don't think about what could have happened. It didn't. She's safe. Because of you. Elena didn't know what to say to that. She stood there in the middle of Wade's kitchen, covered in dust and horsehair, her body still vibrating with leftover fear, and felt like she might break into 1,000 pieces. Wade stepped closer. For a moment she thought he might hug her. Instead, he just placed a hand on her shoulder, steady and grounding. You saved my daughter's life today, he said quietly. I won't forget that. Elena looked up at him. His face was inches from hers, and she could see the exhaustion etched into every line, the grief he carried like a second skin, the desperate love he had for the little girl upstairs. She saw herself reflected back in his eyes. Broken. Scared. Trying so hard to survive in a world that kept taking pieces of them both. I should check on Maisie, Elena said, her voice barely a whisper. Wade's hand dropped. He nodded and stepped back, and the moment shattered like glass. Elena climbed the stairs to Maisie's room and found the little girl curled up on her bed, clutching the wooden horse she'd given Elena weeks ago. Her face was blotchy from crying. Hey, Elena said softly. She sat on the edge of the bed. How you feeling? Scared? Yeah, me too. Maisie looked at her with swollen eyes. Thunder could have hurt you. He could have hurt you really bad. But he didn't. What if he had? Elena pulled Maisie into her lap, holding her tight. Then your papa would have made sure I was okay, just like he made sure you were okay. I don't want you to go away, Maisie whispered. I don't want you to leave after my birthday. Elena closed her eyes, her throat burning. I know, sweetie. Can't you just stay forever? Forever. Such a big word for such a small voice. Elena pressed her face into Maisie's hair and tried not to cry. I can't promise forever, she said, but I promise I'll be here for your birthday, okay? Maisie nodded against her chest. Okay. They sat like that until Maisie's breathing evened out and she fell asleep, exhausted from fear and tears. Elena laid her down gently, pulled the blanket up, and stood to leave. In the doorway, she nearly collided with Wade. He was leaning against the frame, watching them with an expression that made Elena's chest ache. She loves you, he said quietly. I love her too. That makes it harder, doesn't it, knowing you have to leave? Elena looked away. Yeah, it does. Wade was silent for a moment. Then he said, What if you didn't? Elena's head snapped up. What? What if you didn't leave? What if you stayed? Her heart hammered. Wade, we already talked about this. You said 2 weeks. I know what I said. But that was before today. Before I watched you risk your life for my daughter without hesitation. He pushed off the doorframe and faced her fully. I need someone like you here. Maisie needs you, and hell, maybe I need you too. Elena shook her head, panic rising in her throat. You don't know what you're saying. I lied to you. I'm still lying to you about things you don't even know to ask about. If my father finds me, then we'll deal with it. You can't just deal with someone like him. She stopped, the words jamming in her throat. He's what? Violent? Dangerous? Wade's voice was steady. You think I can't handle that? You think this ranch can't protect you? It's not about protecting me. It's about what happens to everyone else when things go wrong. I bring trouble everywhere I go. Everyone who's ever tried to help me has regretted it. I won't. You don't know that. You're right. I don't. Wade took a step closer. But I know what I saw today. I know you're braver than anyone I've ever met. I know my daughter smiles again because of you. And I know I'd be a fool to let you walk away. Elena's eyes stung. Wade, stay, please. His voice cracked on the last word. Stay for Maisie. Stay for the horses. Hell, stay for yourself. But just stay. Elena wanted to say yes. Every fiber of her being wanted to say yes. But she'd learned the hard way that wanting something didn't make it safe, didn't make it right, didn't mean she deserved it. I'll think about it, she whispered. It was the best she could offer, and from the look on Wade's face, it was enough. For now. Elena didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Wade's words echoing in her head like a prayer she didn't know how to answer. Stay. Such a simple word. Such an impossible request. She turned onto her side and watched the moonlight creep across the floor, her mind chasing itself in circles until exhaustion finally dragged her under just before dawn. When she woke, her body felt heavy and her eyes burned. She dressed quickly and went downstairs to find Wade already in the kitchen, standing at the stove with a skillet in hand. He looked up when she entered, and something passed between them, an acknowledgement of what had been said, what hung unanswered in the air. Coffee's ready, he said. Elena poured herself a cup and leaned against the counter. You cook now? Figured you could use a morning off after yesterday. He flipped whatever was in the pan. Eggs okay? Yeah, thanks. They ate in silence, the kind that felt less awkward than it should have. Maisie came down eventually, rubbing sleep from her eyes, and climbed into Elena's lap without a word. She stayed there through breakfast, her small body warm and trusting, and Elena felt the weight of responsibility settle over her shoulders like a yoke. After the hands had eaten and dispersed, Wade found Elena outside hanging laundry. He stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, looking uncomfortable in a way she'd never seen before. About what I said last night, he started. Wade, you don't have to... Let me finish. He cleared his throat. I meant it. What I said about wanting you to stay. But I shouldn't have put that on you right after what happened. You've got enough to worry about without me adding pressure. Elena set down the wet sheet she'd been holding. It's not pressure, it's just complicated. Everything's complicated. Wade kicked at a loose stone. But if you decide you want to stay, the job is yours. No conditions, no deadline. Just work and a place to call home for as long as you need it. Home. Elena turned the word over in her mind. She'd stopped thinking of anywhere as home the day she'd run from her father's ranch. Home meant roots, and roots meant being trapped. But standing here in the morning sun with Wade Callahan looking at her like she mattered, the word didn't sound quite so terrifying. "Can I think about it?" she asked. "Just a little longer?" "Take all the time you need." He walked away before she could respond, and Elena went back to hanging laundry with her heart doing strange things in her chest. Maisie's birthday arrived 2 days later under a clear blue sky that promised heat by midday. Elena woke early and spent the morning baking a cake with what little sugar and flour they had, decorating it with wild berries Maisie had picked the week before. The little girl watched from a chair, swinging her legs and chattering about everything and nothing. "Do you think Papa will let me ride Thunder someday?" Maisie asked. "Maybe when you're older." "How much older?" "Old enough that your papa doesn't have a heart attack watching you." Elena smiled. "Thunder's a lot of horse for someone your size." "You rode him, and you're not that big." "I'm bigger than you, Sweet Pea." Maisie considered this. "Will you teach me? When I'm bigger?" Elena's hand stilled on the cake. Teaching Maisie to ride meant being here months from now, maybe years. It meant staying. It meant choosing this place, these people, this life she'd stumbled into by accident. "Yeah," she heard herself say. "I'll teach you." Maisie's face lit up like sunrise. She launched herself at Elena, wrapping thin arms around her waist. "I knew you'd stay. I knew it." Elena hugged her back, her throat tight. "I haven't decided yet, Maisie." "But you just said—" "I said I'd teach you to ride. That's different." Maisie pulled back, her face scrunched in confusion. "How is it different?" Elena didn't have a good answer for that. She distracted Maisie with cake frosting duty and tried not to think about the promises she was making without meaning to. The afternoon brought a small celebration. Wade had given the hands the afternoon off, and a few of them stuck around to wish Maisie happy birthday. Tommy brought a wooden doll he'd carved, and one of the other hands presented a braided horsehair bracelet. Even the normally gruff cook from the bunkhouse showed up with a bag of hard candies. Maisie was radiant. She wore her best dress and ran around showing everyone her gifts, her laughter ringing across the ranch. Wade stood on the porch watching, and Elena caught him smiling, actually smiling, for the first time since she'd arrived. "Never thought I'd see that again," Tommy said quietly, appearing at Elena's elbow. "The boss smiling, I mean. He loves her." "Yeah, but loving someone and letting yourself be happy about it are different things. He's been so buried in grief, I think he forgot how." Tommy glanced at Elena. "You did that. Brought them both back." Elena shook her head. "I just got lucky." "Luck had nothing to do with it." Tommy nudged her shoulder. "You staying on then, after today?" "I don't know." "Well, for what it's worth, I hope you do. Place feels different with you here. Better." He walked away before Elena could figure out how to respond. She stood alone watching Maisie play, feeling the weight of too many expectations pressing down on her. That evening, after the celebration had wound down and Maisie had been put to bed exhausted and happy, Elena found herself on the porch with Wade. The sun was setting in violent shades of orange and red, painting the prairie in colors too beautiful to be real. "Thank you," Wade said, "for today, for making it special. She's a good kid. Easy to make her happy." That wasn't always true. Wade leaned against the porch rail. After her mother died, Maisie didn't speak for 6 months, didn't eat much, barely slept. The doctor said it was shock, that she might never fully come back from it. Elena's chest ached. But she did. Little by little. But she was still so quiet, so sad all the time. He looked at Elena. "Then you showed up and something changed, like you reminded her it was okay to be a kid again." "I didn't do anything special." "You did everything special. You saw her, really saw her, instead of tiptoeing around her like she was made of glass." Wade's voice roughened. "You saved her twice. Once when Thunder got loose, and once just by being here, by singing to her, by giving a damn." Elena didn't know what to say. She stood there watching the sun sink lower, feeling Wade's presence beside her like heat from a fire. and wondered when her life had gotten so tangled up in his. I talked to the hands today, Wade continued. Told them you're staying on permanently if you want the job. Nobody objected. Most of them seemed relieved, actually. Said the horses have been calmer since you started working with them. Wade, I'm not trying to pressure you. I just wanted you to know the door's open. Whenever you're ready to walk through it. Elena turned to look at him. The dying light caught his face, highlighting the lines around his eyes, the gray threading through his hair, the weariness that lived in his bones. He looked like a man who'd been fighting for too long and was finally ready to lay down his weapons. What if my father shows up? She asked quietly. Then I'll deal with him. You don't know what he's like, what he's capable of. You don't know what I'm capable of. Wade's voice was steel. This is my land, my home. Nobody comes here and threatens the people under my protection, not without going through me first. Elena's eyes stung. Why do you even care? I've been nothing but trouble since I got here. Because you're not trouble. You're just someone who got dealt a bad hand and is doing her best to survive it. He paused. And because Maisie loves you, and He stopped, seemed to catch himself. I respect the hell out of you, the way you keep going even when everything's stacked against you. That takes guts. Elena looked away, blinking hard. I need more time. You've got it. They stood in silence as darkness crept across the prairie and the first stars began to appear. Eventually Wade went inside, but Elena stayed on the porch until the cold drove her to bed. The next morning brought trouble. Elena was in the barn checking on the mare when she heard hoofbeats approaching fast. She stepped outside to see a rider coming up the road at a gallop, dust billowing behind him. As he got closer, she recognized him, the man from town who'd first told her about the job, the one who'd sent her to the ranch in the first place. He pulled his horse up hard in front of the barn, breathing almost as heavily as the animal. Wade here? In the house. What's wrong? Need to talk to him. Now. Elena followed the man to the house, her stomach knotting. Wade met them at the door, took one look at the man's face, and his expression went hard. What happened? Roy's been in town spreading stories. Says you got a woman here who's wanted back east. Says she's a horse thief and a liar, and that you're too blind to see it. The man glanced at Elena apologetically. Says her real name isn't Elena Mercer. Says it's Elena Harrow. The world tilted. Elena grabbed the porch rail to steady herself. Harrow was her father's name, the name she'd been trying to escape since the day she was born. Wade's hand was suddenly on her elbow, steadying her. She's not wanted for anything. Roy's making things up because I threw him off the ranch. Maybe. But he's convincing enough that people are listening, and there's more. The man shifted uncomfortably. He sent a telegram to someone back east. I couldn't see who, but word is he's trying to find information about her, about where she came from. Elena's blood turned to ice. If Roy had sent a telegram mentioning her real name, if anyone back east saw it, if her father found out where she was. How long ago? Wade's voice was clipped. 2 days? Maybe 3. Elena did the math. 3 days for a telegram to travel. Maybe another few days for a response. A week after that for someone to make the journey if they decided to come. She had 2 weeks at most before her past caught up with her. Elena. Wade turned her to face him. Look at me. She forced herself to meet his eyes. They were steady, determined, completely unafraid. We'll handle this, he said firmly. Roy's just trying to cause trouble. Even if your father gets that telegram, even if he shows up here, he can't touch you. You understand? Elena shook her head. You don't understand. If he comes, I'll make it real clear he's not welcome. Wade's jaw was set. Nobody's taking you anywhere you don't want to go. Not while I'm breathing. The man cleared his throat. There's one more thing. Roy's been drinking heavy and talking big. Says he's going to come back and settle scores. Some of the boys in town think he's all bluster, but I figured you should know. Wade's expression darkened. Appreciate the warning. Tell the others I said thanks. After the man left, Wade led Elena inside and made her sit at the kitchen table. She was shaking so badly her teeth chattered. Tell me about your father, Wade said quietly. The truth this time. All of it. So Elena told him. About growing up on a ranch twice the size of Wade's, about learning to train horses from the time she could walk, about her father's brutal methods and even more brutal temper. about the beatings that came whenever she showed compassion instead of cruelty, about her mother's death when Elena was 12, and how her father had blamed her for it, about the years of verbal and physical abuse that had worn her down until she'd believed every terrible thing he said about her. "He told me I was worthless," Elena said, her voice hollow, "that I'd never amount to anything, that the only value I had was in what I could do for him. When I started getting better with the horses than he was, when people started asking for me instead of him, he couldn't stand it." Wade listened without interrupting, his face carved from stone. "The night I left, he'd been drinking. I'd refused to break a mare the way he wanted. She was pregnant and scared, and what he was asking would have hurt her. So he came at me with a whip." Elena's hand went unconsciously to her ribs, to the scars she still carried. "I fought back for the first time in my life, grabbed the whip and ran. He tried to follow, but I had a horse saddled, and I knew the land better than he did. By the time he sobered up enough to realize I was really gone, I was 3 towns away." "And you've been running ever since?" "Yeah." Wade was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood and walked to the window, staring out at the ranch. "This father of yours, he got a name?" "Marcus Harrow." "He ever come after you before? Send anyone looking?" Elena shook her head. "I don't think so. But I've been careful. Never stayed anywhere long enough to leave a trail. Used my mother's maiden name instead of his." She swallowed hard. "If Roy mentioned my real name in that telegram, if anyone connects Elena Harrow to Marcus Harrow's ranch, then he'll come." Wade's voice was matter-of-fact. "And when he does, we'll be ready. Wade, you can't fight my father. He's not a good man. He's dangerous." Wade turned back to face her. "So am I, when it comes to protecting what's mine." The words hung in the air between them. What's mine? Elena's heart did something complicated in her chest. "I should leave," she said. "Before he gets here. Before anyone else gets hurt because of me." "No." "Wade." I said no. He crossed the room and crouched in front of her chair, his hands on the armrests, his face inches from hers. "You've been running for years, letting fear make your decisions, letting that bastard control your life even from a distance. When's it gonna stop?" "When he stops looking for me. Men like that never stop, you know that." Wade's eyes were fierce. "But you know what? He can't hurt you here. Not with me standing between you and him. Not with every man on this ranch ready to back you up. You want to run? I can't stop you. But if you stay, I swear on my daughter's life that your father won't touch you." Elena's vision blurred. "Why are you doing this?" "Because somebody should have protected you a long time ago. And because—" He stopped, jaw working. "Because I care what happens to you. A hell of a lot more than I should, probably." Elena reached out and touched his face, her hand trembling. Wade's eyes closed briefly at the contact. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know, but you're staying anyway, aren't you?" Elena took a shaky breath. Then she nodded. "Yeah, I'm staying." Wade's expression softened for just a moment before the steel returned. "Good. Then we prepare." Over the next few days, the ranch transformed into something resembling a fortress. Wade gathered the hands and explained the situation, carefully, without revealing more than necessary, but making it clear that trouble might be coming. To Elena's surprise, every single man volunteered to help. They took shifts keeping watch on the road. They made sure the weapons were cleaned and accessible. They worked out plans for different scenarios, different approaches. Tommy appointed himself Elena's unofficial bodyguard, sticking close whenever she left the house. "Can't be too careful," he said with a grin that didn't quite hide the worry in his eyes. Elena continued working with the horses, but now Wade insisted someone be with her at all times. She tried to argue that it was unnecessary, but one look at his face told her she wouldn't win that fight. Maisie sensed something was wrong. She got clingy, following Elena everywhere, asking questions Elena couldn't answer honestly. At night, she had bad dreams, and Elena would end up in her room singing lullabies until the little girl fell back asleep. "Is something bad going to happen?" Maisie asked one night. Elena smoothed the hair back from her forehead. "I hope not, sweetie." "But you're scared." "Yeah, a little." Maisie grabbed her hand. "Papa won't let anything bad happen. He's really strong." "I know he is." "And you're strong too. You stopped thunder." Elena managed a smile. "Thanks, baby." So together you're really, really strong. And nothing bad can happen when people are that strong together, right? Out of the mouths of children. Elena kissed Maisie's forehead. Right. A week passed, then another. Tension settled over the ranch like a heavy blanket. Men jumped at shadows. Every rider on the horizon was scrutinized until identified. Elena found herself looking over her shoulder constantly, waiting for the other shoe to drop. And then it did. Elena was in the barn late one afternoon when Tommy came running. Riders coming, 4 of them. Wade wants you in the house. Elena's stomach dropped. Is it? Don't know yet, but best to be safe. She ran to the house, her heart hammering. Wade was on the porch with his rifle, his face grim. He grabbed her arm and pulled her behind him. Stay inside with Maisie. Lock the door. Don't come out until I tell you. Wade, do it. Now. Elena backed into the house and found Maisie sitting on the stairs, her face white. She scooped the little girl up and carried her to Wade's bedroom, the most defensible room in the house. They huddled together on the floor behind the bed, and Elena's hands shook as she held Maisie close. Outside, she could hear voices. Deep male voices. Then Wade's voice, hard and unwavering. The front door rattled. Elena's breath caught. But it was Wade's voice that came through. It's okay. They're gone. Elena stood on shaking legs and carried Maisie downstairs. Wade was standing in the middle of the front room, his rifle still in his hand. His face was tight with barely controlled anger. Who was it? Elena asked. Drifters looking for work. Harmless. He set the rifle down. But we got word from town. Your father's in Black Hollow. Arrived yesterday. Been asking questions about the ranches out this way. The room spun. Elena sat down hard on the nearest chair. He's here. Yeah. What did he say? What's he want? According to the bartender, he's looking for his daughter. Says she ran away from home and he's worried about her. Playing the concerned father. Wade's expression was contemptuous. Nobody's buying it. Man drinks like a fish and has mean eyes, according to the folks who've talked to him. Elena pressed her hands to her face. He's going to come here. It's just a matter of time. I know. That's why I'm going to town tomorrow. Gonna have a conversation with him myself. Elena's head snapped up. No, Wade, you can't. Someone needs to make it clear he's not welcome here. Might as well be me. He'll hurt you. Wade's smile was cold. He can try. Elena grabbed his arm. Please don't do this. Just let me talk to him. Let you what? Walk back into his reach? Absolutely not. Wade covered her hand with his. Trust me, I'll handle this. How? By telling him the truth. That his daughter doesn't want to see him. That she's got a life here now. People who care about her. And he needs to move on. He won't listen. Then I'll make sure he understands anyway. Wade's eyes were steel. I told you I'd protect you. I meant it. That night, Elena barely slept. She kept seeing her father's face, hearing his voice, feeling the phantom pain of old beatings. She got up before dawn and found Wade in the kitchen already dressed and armed. I'm coming with you, she said. No. Wade, he's my father. I should be the one. No. Wade's voice was final. I'm not letting you anywhere near him. This is my fight now. It was never your fight. It's mine. Wade crossed the room and took her face in his hands, his thumb brushing her cheek. The day you decided to stay, it became mine too. Let me do this, please. Elena wanted to argue, wanted to fight, but the look in Wade's eyes stopped her. This was important to him, proving he could protect her, proving she could rely on him. And maybe she needed to let him try. Okay, she whispered, but if he hurts you, he won't. Wade pressed a kiss to her forehead, brief and fierce. I'll be back before supper. He left with Tommy and 2 other hands, heavily armed and grim-faced. Elena watched them ride away and felt like her heart was going with them. The day dragged. Every minute felt like an hour. Elena tried to stay busy, tried to keep Maisie distracted, but her mind kept wandering to town. To the confrontation she knew was happening. She imagined a dozen different scenarios, each one worse than the last. Late afternoon came, then evening. The sun started to set, and still no sign of Wade. Elena stood on the porch watching the road, her stomach in knots. Maisie was beside her, equally silent and worried. He'll come back, Maisie said quietly. Papa always comes back. Elena hoped she was right. Darkness fell. The stars came out. And finally, she heard hoofbeats. 4 riders emerged from the gloom. Wade was in front, sitting tall in his saddle. Elena's knees nearly gave out with relief. She ran down the porch steps as Wade dismounted. "What happened?" she asked breathlessly. "Are you okay? Did you—" Wade caught her in his arms and held on tight. "It's handled." "What does that mean?" "It means your father won't be bothering you anymore." Wade pulled back enough to look at her. His lip was split and there was a bruise forming on his jaw, but he was smiling, actually smiling. "Had a real productive conversation." Tommy dismounted behind him, grinning. "Boss knocked him flat on his ass. Should have seen it." Elena's hands flew to Wade's face, checking the damage. "He hit you after I told him his daughter was under my protection and he could either accept that or get the hell out of my territory. He chose option 3. Take a swing at me." Wade winced as Elena touched his split lip. "So I returned the favor. You hit my father." "Multiple times. Man has got a glass jaw, turns out." Wade's smile faded. "Then I explained real carefully that you're staying here of your own free will, that you're an adult who can make her own choices, that if he tried to take you or hurt you or come near this ranch, I'd have him arrested for assault. And if the law didn't handle it, I would, personally." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "What did he say?" "A lot of things not fit for polite company, but in the end, he left. Rode out of town about an hour ago, headed east. Bartender's going to send word if he comes back, but I don't think he will. I made sure he understood I wasn't bluffing." Elena threw her arms around Wade's neck and held on like he was the only solid thing in a spinning world. He wrapped his arms around her waist and held her just as tight. "It's over," he murmured into her hair. "He's gone. You're safe." Elena pulled back, tears streaming down her face. "You could have been killed, but I wasn't, and neither were you. That's what matters." "Why would you risk that for me?" Wade looked at her like the answer should be obvious. "Because you matter. To Maisie. To this ranch. To—" He stopped, his jaw working. "To me. You matter to me." Elena couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, could only stare at this man who'd faced down her demons without hesitation. Maisie's voice broke the moment. "Papa, you're bleeding!" Wade turned to his daughter with a rueful smile. "Just a scratch, baby. Nothing to worry about." "Elena, can you fix him?" Elena wiped her eyes and nodded. "Yeah, sweetie, I'll fix him." She led Wade inside and made him sit at the kitchen table while she cleaned his split lip and checked his ribs. Tommy and the other hands gave them privacy, disappearing to the bunkhouse with knowing grins. "You're lucky he didn't break anything," Elena said, dabbing antiseptic on the cut. Wade hissed but didn't pull away. "Worth it." "Was it?" "Seeing the look on his face when I told him you weren't his property anymore?" "Yeah, definitely worth it." Wade caught her wrist. "You believe me now? That you're safe here?" Elena set down the cloth and looked at him. Really looked at him. At the bruises he'd taken for her. At the fierce determination in his eyes. At the way he'd ridden into town and faced down the monster she'd been running from for years. "Yeah," she whispered. "I believe you." "Good." Wade pulled her closer until she was standing between his knees. "Because I meant what I said. You're under my protection now. That means something out here. That means you're mine to defend." "Yours," Elena repeated softly. "If you want to be." Elena's heart was hammering so hard she was sure he could hear it. She reached up and touched his face, careful of the bruises. "What if I do?" Wade's hand came up to cover hers. "Then we figure it out together. You, me, and Maisie, whatever comes next." "That simple?" "That's simple." Elena leaned down and pressed her forehead to his, her eyes closing. For the first time in years, maybe in her entire life, she felt safe. Not because there were no more threats, but because she wasn't facing them alone anymore. "Okay," she whispered. "Together." Wade's arms came around her, pulling her into his lap. They sat like that for a long time, holding each other in the quiet kitchen, while outside the stars wheeled overhead and the prairie wind sang through the darkness. Maisie found them eventually, padding into the kitchen in her nightgown. She looked at them curled together in the chair and smiled, bright and knowing. Does this mean Elena's staying forever now? She asked. Wade looked at Elena, his eyes asking the question his daughter had voiced. Elena smiled through fresh tears. Yeah, baby, I'm staying forever. Maisie launched herself at them, wrapping her small arms around both their necks. They held her between them, this little girl who'd brought them together, and for a moment everything felt perfect. Not smooth, not easy, but perfect in the way broken things can be when they're finally put back together by the right hands. Outside, the ranch settled into peaceful silence. The horses were quiet in their stalls. The hands were settled in the bunkhouse. And inside the house, a family that had been shattered and scattered was slowly, carefully becoming whole again. It wouldn't be simple. There would be hard days ahead, memories that surfaced without warning, scars that never fully healed, but they'd face it together, all three of them, building something new from the wreckage of what had been. And that, Elena thought as she held Wade and Maisie close, was more than she'd ever dared to hope for. The days after Wade's confrontation with Marcus Harrow felt different, lighter somehow, like a storm had passed and left clean air in its wake. Elena moved through her work with a new steadiness, no longer glancing over her shoulder every few minutes, no longer flinching at unexpected sounds. The fear that had lived in her chest for years had finally begun to loosen its grip. But letting go of fear didn't mean the wounds had healed. Some mornings, Elena still woke with her father's voice in her head telling her she was worthless. Some nights, she still dreamed of being cornered, trapped, helpless. The difference now was that when she opened her eyes, she wasn't alone. Wade was down the hall. Maisie was in the next room. The ranch hands were in the bunkhouse. She was surrounded by people who'd chosen to stand with her, and that made all the difference. 3 weeks after Marcus left town, Elena was working with a young gelding in the corral when Wade appeared at the fence. He'd taken to checking on her throughout the day, never intrusively, just a quiet presence that said, "I'm here if you need me." This time, though, he looked like he had something on his mind. "Got a letter from town," he said, holding up an envelope. Bartender wrote, "Says your father's been seen 2 territories east. Headed back where he came from, looks like." Elena's hand stilled on the horse's neck. "He's really gone." "Looks that way." Wade climbed over the fence and stood beside her. "How you feeling about that?" Elena thought about it. She'd expected relief. And there was relief, a lot of it. But there was something else, too. A hollow kind of sadness for the relationship she'd never had, for the father who'd chosen cruelty over love. "I feel like I lost something I never actually had," she said quietly. "Does that make sense?" "Yeah, it does." Wade's hand found hers. Grieving what could have been is harder than grieving what was. At least that's what I've learned. He was talking about his wife, Elena knew. About the woman who'd loved her family but couldn't outrun her own demons. About the life that might have been if things had gone differently. "Do you still miss her?" Elena asked. "Your wife? Wade was quiet for a long moment. "I miss who she was before the darkness took hold. The woman who laughed at stupid things and sang off-key and made Maisie giggle. That person's been gone a long time." He squeezed Elena's hand. "But I'm learning you can miss someone and still move forward. That honoring what was good doesn't mean staying stuck in what was broken." Elena turned to look at him. "Is that what we're doing? Moving forward?" "I'd like to think so." Wade's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "If you're willing." "I'm willing. I'm just not sure I know how. I've spent so long running, I don't know what it looks like to actually build something." "Then we'll figure it out together, one day at a time." Wade's expression turned serious. "But I need you to know something. This thing between us, whatever it is or becomes, it's not about me trying to replace what you lost or you filling the hole my wife left. It's about 2 people who got beat up by life deciding they're tired of facing it alone." Elena's throat tightened. "I'm damaged goods, Wade. I've got scars and nightmares and a past that's going to follow me no matter how far I run. You think I don't have scars? That I'm not damaged too?" Wade shook his head. "We're all broken in one way or another. The question is whether we're going to let that break define us or whether we're going to build something new from the pieces." "And what are we building?" Wade looked at her for a long moment, his eyes intense. "A life, a family, a future that doesn't look like our past, if you want it." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. "I want it. I'm just scared I'll mess it up." You will. So will I. That's part of being human. Wade pulled her closer. But Maisie deserves to grow up in a house that isn't haunted by grief, and we deserve a chance to be happy, even if we have to learn how. Elena leaned into him, pressing her face against his chest. His arms came around her, solid and sure. Okay, she whispered. Let's try. That night at supper, Maisie was unusually quiet. She pushed food around her plate and kept shooting glances at Elena and Wade. Finally, she set down her fork with an exaggerated sigh. Are you two going to get married? Wade choked on his coffee. Elena felt her face go hot. Maisie, that's not... We haven't... Why not? You love each other, don't you? Sweetheart, it's more complicated than that, Wade said. No, it's not. Maisie crossed her arms. Mama's gone and she's not coming back. And Elena's here and she makes you smile. And she makes me happy. So why can't she be my new mama? The words hung in the air. Wade looked at Elena, something raw and vulnerable in his eyes. Elena's heart was hammering so hard she could barely breathe. Maisie, Elena said gently, being someone's mama is a really big thing. It's not something people just decide overnight. But you already act like my mama. You sing to me and fix my hair and make me eat vegetables. That's what mamas do. Your first mama will always be your mama, Elena said firmly. Nothing changes that. But if your papa and I decided to be together, then yeah, I guess I'd be like a mama to you too, if you wanted that. Maisie's face lit up. I want that. Hold on now, Wade interjected. Nobody's talking about getting married tomorrow. Elena and I need time to figure things out. How much time? However much we need, baby. Wade's voice was gentle but firm. But I promise you'll be the first to know if anything changes. Deal? Maisie considered this, then nodded. Deal. But don't take too long, okay? I'm not getting any younger. She said it with such seriousness that both Elena and Wade burst out laughing. The tension broke, and the rest of supper passed in comfortable conversation. But later, after Maisie was in bed, Wade found Elena on the porch. Sorry about that, he said. She's got no filter sometimes. She's honest. I like that about her. Elena looked up at the stars. But she's not wrong, is she? About us? No, she's not wrong. Wade leaned against the porch rail. I've been trying to figure out the right way to say this, the right time, but there probably isn't a right way, so I'm just going to say it. I love you, Elena. Elena's breath caught. Wade, I know it's fast. I know we've only known each other a few months, but when you've lived the life I've lived, you learn not to waste time on things that matter. And you matter, more than I thought anyone could matter again. He turned to face her fully. I'm not asking you to marry me tonight, but I'm asking if you can see a future where that might happen. Where you stay here, not just because you need a place to hide, but because you want to build a life with me and Maisie. Elena stood and walked to him, her heart pounding. I love you too. I didn't want to. I tried not to, but I do. Wade's hands came up to frame her face. Yeah? Yeah? Elena smiled through tears. And yes, I can see that future. I want that future. Wade kissed her then, soft and careful, like she was something precious. Elena kissed him back, tasting coffee and hope and the promise of something she'd never dared believe she could have. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. So what now? Elena asked. Now we take it one day at a time. Let people get used to seeing us together. Give Maisie time to adjust. And when it feels right, we make it official. Wade tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Sound good? Sounds perfect. They stood on the porch for a long time, holding each other under the vast prairie sky. And Elena felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt like she was home. The weeks that followed settled into a new rhythm. Elena continued working with the horses, and her reputation spread. Neighboring ranchers started asking if she'd take a look at their problem animals. Wade charged them a fee, and Elena's earnings went into a small account Wade set up for her. Your money, he said firmly, in case you ever need it. Elena knew what he meant, in case things went wrong, in case she needed to run again. But she also knew she wouldn't need it. She wasn't running anymore. The ranch hands fully accepted her now. They asked her advice on handling difficult horses and included her in their conversations. Tommy started calling her Boss Lady as a joke, but the nickname stuck. Even the new foreman Wade had hired, a quiet man named Jack, who was the opposite of Roy in every way, treated Elena with respect. Maisie blossomed. She followed Elena everywhere, chattering constantly, asking to help with the horses. Elena started teaching her basic care, how to brush them, how to read their body language, how to approach them calmly. Maisie was a natural, gentle, and intuitive in ways that reminded Elena of herself at that age. One afternoon, while they were grooming one of the mares, Maisie said, "I'm glad you came here." Elena smiled. "Me too, Sweet Pea." Even though it was scary at first? Especially because it was scary. Sometimes the best things in life are on the other side of scary. Maisie thought about this. Is that why Mama left? Because she was scared? Elena's hand stilled. She looked at Maisie, at the serious expression on her small face, and chose her words carefully. Your mama was sick in a way that's hard to explain. Not sick like a cold or a fever, sick in her mind and her heart. And sometimes people who are sick like that do things that don't make sense to the rest of us. Did she love me? Oh, baby, yes, she loved you so much. Then why did she leave me in the wagon? When it tipped over, why didn't she get me out first? Elena's heart broke. She set down the brush and pulled Maisie into her lap. Sometimes when people are really sick, they can't think clearly. They don't make the choices they would if they were well. But I promise you, your mama loved you. That part was real, even when everything else was confusing. Maisie was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I don't remember her voice anymore. Is that bad? No, honey, that's not bad. That's just what happens when time passes. But you know what? You've got her smile, and her eyes, and the way you scrunch up your nose when you're thinking hard about something. Those are all pieces of her that live in you. So even if you can't remember her voice, she's still with you. Maisie snuggled closer. Will you help me remember the good things about her, so I don't forget everything? Of course I will. And so will your papa. Okay. Maisie was quiet for a moment. Elena, when you and Papa get married, will you be my mama then? If you want me to be. I do. But can I still call you Elena? Mama feels like it belongs to someone else. Elena's eyes filled with tears. This child's capacity for love and wisdom astounded her. You can call me whatever feels right to you, Elena, Mama, or something else entirely. As long as you know I love you and I'm not going anywhere. Maisie turned and wrapped her arms around Elena's neck. I know, and I love you too. They sat like that in the barn, holding each other while the horses shifted in their stalls, and Elena felt a fierce protectiveness surge through her. This little girl had been through so much, had lost so much, but she was still here, still fighting, still loving. She was stronger than she knew. They both were. As summer gave way to fall, Wade started talking seriously about the future. He wanted to expand the horse training operation, make it a real business instead of just a side income. He wanted to build a separate barn for the training work. He wanted to hire another hand or two to help with the regular ranch work, so Elena could focus on what she did best. You're thinking long-term, Elena said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. That a problem? No, it's just new. I haven't thought long-term about anything in years. Wade took her hand. Get used to it, because I'm planning on you being here for a very long time. How long? Forever, if I have my way. Wade pulled a small box from his pocket and held it out to her. Which is why I want to make this official. Elena's heart stopped. She stared at the box, then at Wade's face. He looked nervous, which was somehow endearing on a man who never looked nervous about anything. I know we said we'd take our time, Wade said, but the thing is, I'm sure. I've been sure since the day you saved Maisie from thunder. Since before that, maybe. And I don't see the point in waiting when I know what I want. He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small diamond. It was my grandmother's. Not fancy, but it's been in the family a long time. Will you marry me, Elena? Elena looked at the ring, at this man who'd given her safety when she had nowhere to go, who'd fought her demons alongside her, who'd shown her what it meant to be loved without conditions. Tears streamed down her face. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. Wade's face broke into the biggest smile she'd ever seen on him. He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, then pulled her into his arms. They kissed on the porch as the sun set in brilliant shades of red and gold, and Elena felt like her heart might burst from happiness. They told Maisie at breakfast the next morning. She screamed with joy and launched herself at both of them, nearly knocking over the coffee pot in her excitement. She insisted on telling every single ranch hand personally, dragging Elena and Wade around to announce the news. The men congratulated them with genuine warmth, and Tommy went so far as to hug Elena and say, "About damn time." They decided on a small ceremony. Just the ranch hands, a few friends from town, and the justice of the peace. Nothing fancy, nothing that would draw attention or require explanations about Elena's past, just a quiet celebration of two people choosing each other. The wedding took place 6 weeks later on a crisp October afternoon. Elena wore a simple blue dress that Maisie insisted made her look like a princess. Wade wore his Sunday best and looked uncomfortable in it, which made Elena smile. They stood in front of the ranch house with everyone they cared about gathered around, and promised to love each other through whatever came next. When the justice of the peace said, "You may kiss your bride," Wade did so with a tenderness that made Elena's knees weak. Maisie cheered loudly, and the ranch hands whistled and clapped. It wasn't a fancy wedding by anyone's standards, but it was perfect. That night, after the celebration had wound down and Maisie was asleep upstairs, Wade and Elena sat on the porch together. Elena wore Wade's ring on her finger and her head on his shoulder, and everything felt right in a way nothing had ever felt right before. "You happy?" Wade asked. "Happier than I knew I could be." "Good, because you're stuck with me now." Wade kissed the top of her head. "No more running, no more hiding, just us building something real." Elena thought about the terrified woman who'd arrived at this ranch months ago with nothing but a canvas bag and a lifetime of trauma. She thought about how far she'd come, how much she'd changed. But more than that, she thought about how she'd finally learned that running from pain didn't make it go away, that healing required staying in one place long enough to let people see you, flaws and all. That family wasn't about blood or perfection. It was about choosing to show up every day and do the work of loving imperfect people. "You know what's funny?" Elena said. "I spent years thinking I had to be perfect to deserve love. That if people knew the real me, the broken parts, the scared parts, the parts my father said were worthless, they'd reject me. But you've seen all of that. The lies, the fear, the mess. And you chose me anyway. Because those broken parts don't define you. What defines you is how you kept going despite them. How you found the courage to stop running and start building. That's what I fell in love with. Not some perfect version of you, but the real you. Scars and all." Elena wiped her eyes. "I used to think surviving was enough. That if I could just make it through each day without falling apart, I was doing okay. But this isn't just surviving. This is actually living, and it's terrifying and wonderful, and I don't want to mess it up." "You won't mess it up, and if you do, we'll fix it together." Wade turned her to face him. "That's what partnership means, showing up for each other on the bad days, not just the good ones. Being honest even when it's hard. Forgiving each other's mistakes because we're both going to make plenty." "When did you get so wise?" "When I realized I didn't want to spend the rest of my life half alive. When you showed up and reminded me what it felt like to actually feel something again." Wade's thumb traced her cheekbone. "You saved me just as much as I saved you, maybe more." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the prairie. Then Elena said, "I want to write to the women's shelter in Black Hollow. Tell them about what happened with my father, about how Wade stood up to him. Maybe it'll help someone else who's running." Wade nodded. "That's a good idea. Your story could make a difference. It's not much. One woman escaping one bad situation. It's everything. Every person who gets free breaks the cycle. Every person who stands up to an abuser shows others it's possible." Wade squeezed her hand. "Besides, look what came from you escaping. You saved a little girl from grief. You brought life back to a dying ranch. You reminded everyone here what it means to give a damn. That's not nothing." Elena thought about Maisie sleeping peacefully upstairs, no longer plagued by nightmares. About Thunder and the other horses who'd learned they could trust again. About the ranch hands who'd learned to see strength in gentleness. About Wade, who'd finally let himself love again after losing so much. She thought about the version of herself who'd arrived here terrified and alone, and the version sitting here now, married, loved, part of something bigger than herself. The journey between those two versions hadn't been smooth. There had been setbacks and scares, and moments when she'd nearly run again. But she'd stayed, and that staying had made all the difference.
You know what I've learned? Elena said. That home isn't a place. It's people. It's finding the ones who see you at your worst and choose to stay anyway, who fight for you when you're too tired to fight for yourself, who remind you that your past doesn't have to be your future. And what else? Wade prompted, sensing there was more.
That healing isn't linear. Some days I'll wake up feeling strong and capable. Other days I'll wake up hearing my father's voice telling me I'm worthless. But having you and Maisie means I don't have to face those bad days alone. It means when I stumble, someone's there to catch me. Always, Wade promised, for the rest of our lives, good days and bad. Winter came, bringing cold winds and early snows. Elena and Wade settled into married life with surprising ease. They had their disagreements. She thought he was too protective. He thought she pushed herself too hard. But they learned to talk through them instead of letting resentment build. They made mistakes and forgave each other. They had bad days and good days. They built a life together one moment at a time.
Maisie thrived. She started school in town and made friends for the first time in years. She talked more, laughed more, dreamed more. Sometimes she still had hard days when she missed her first mother. But Elena and Wade made sure she knew it was okay to miss someone and move forward at the same time. That loving someone new didn't mean forgetting someone who died.
The horse training business grew beyond what Wade had expected. Word spread about the woman at the Callahan ranch, who could gentle the wildest animals with nothing but patience and respect. Ranchers came from 3 territories away to bring their problem horses. Elena's earnings meant they could hire more help, expand the facilities, invest in better equipment. What had started as Elena just trying to survive became something she took pride in, purpose she'd never imagined having. One spring evening, nearly a year after Elena had first arrived at the ranch, she and Wade were in the barn checking on a mare about to foal. The animal was restless, pacing her stall, clearly close to delivering. Elena stayed with her, murmuring soothing words while Wade watched from the doorway.
You ever think about having kids? Wade asked suddenly. More kids, I mean. Besides Maisie. Elena looked up, surprised. I haven't really thought about it. Why?
Just wondering. Maisie asked me this morning if she was going to get a baby brother or sister. Wade smiled. Apparently her friend at school just got one, and now she's feeling left out. Elena laughed. Of course she did. She turned back to the mare, running her hand along the animal's side. Would you want that? More children? Only if you do. I'm happy with things as they are. But if you wanted to add to our family, I wouldn't be opposed.
Elena thought about it. A year ago, the idea would have terrified her. She'd been too broken, too scared, too uncertain about her own future to imagine bringing a child into the world. But now, standing in the warm barn with Wade nearby and a life they'd built together surrounding her, it didn't seem so impossible. Maybe, she said softly, someday, when we're ready. No rush, we've got time. The mare's water broke suddenly, and Elena snapped into focus. For the next hour, she helped guide the birth, supporting the mare as she delivered a healthy filly. When it was done and the newborn was nursing, Elena stood and wiped her hands on a rag, exhausted but exhilarated. Wade pulled her into his arms. You're amazing, you know that? I'm just doing what needs doing. No, you're doing what you were meant to do, bringing life and healing to broken things. That's your gift. Wade kissed her forehead. I'm lucky I get to witness it every day. Elena leaned into him, watching the mare with her new foal, life continuing, hope renewing, broken things becoming whole again. It was a kind of miracle, and she got to be part of it. Wade, she said quietly. Yeah? Thank you for giving me a chance when no one else would, for seeing something in me worth protecting, for teaching me I didn't have to be perfect to deserve love. You don't owe me thanks. You earned every bit of what you have here through your own strength and courage. Wade held her tighter. But you're welcome anyway. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the barn while the horses settled for the night and stars began to appear through the open door. 2 broken people who'd found each other at exactly the right time, who'd chosen to build something beautiful from the wreckage of their pasts. In the house, Maisie was probably getting ready for bed, maybe singing to herself the way Elena had taught her. Tomorrow, there would be horses to train and meals to cook and the endless work of running a ranch.
There would be hard days and setbacks and moments of doubt, but there would also be laughter and love and the daily miracle of showing up for each other. Elena had learned that healing wasn't about erasing the past or pretending the pain had never happened. It was about integrating those experiences into who you became, about letting scars be proof of survival rather than marks of shame, about understanding that being broken didn't mean being unfixable. It just meant you had to be willing to do the hard work of putting yourself back together, piece by piece. And sometimes, if you were incredibly lucky, you found people willing to help, people who saw your cracks and didn't run, people who understood that the strongest bonds were forged between imperfect people choosing each other anyway. That was the real lesson Elena had learned in her time at the Callahan Ranch. That vulnerability was strength, that asking for help was courage, that letting people see you, really see you, flaws and fears and failures included, was the only way to build genuine connection. And that home wasn't something you found. It was something you built with intention and effort and the daily choice to show up and try again. Years would pass. Maisie would grow up and leave for school, though she'd always come back to the ranch that had saved her. Elena and Wade would have another child, a son who'd have his father's quiet strength and his mother's gentle touch with animals. Thunder would live to an old age, retiring to peaceful days in the pasture. The ranch would continue to grow and thrive. But the heart of it all would remain the same. A woman who'd learned to stop running. A man who'd learned to live again. A little girl who'd found her voice. 3 broken people who'd become a family by choosing each other every single day. On this particular spring night, though, Elena didn't know any of that yet. She just knew she was happy. Genuinely, deeply happy in a way she'd never imagined possible. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. "Come on," Wade said finally, pulling back. "Let's get to bed. Tomorrow's another early day." They walked hand in hand back to the house, leaving the barn door open so the cool night air could flow through. Inside, they checked on Maisie, fast asleep with a smile on her face, then climbed into their own bed. Wade pulled Elena close, her back to his chest, his arm around her waist. "I love you," he murmured into her hair. "I love you too." Elena closed her eyes and let herself drift, secure in the knowledge that she was safe, that she was loved, that she'd finally found the home she'd been searching for all along. Not in a place, but in the hearts of the people who'd chosen her, who'd fought for her, who'd reminded her that she was worth fighting for. The prairie wind sang through the darkness outside, carrying with it the scent of sage and possibility. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges and joys. But for tonight, Elena Callahan, no longer Mercer, no longer Harrow, but Callahan, wife and mother and horse trainer, was exactly where she was meant to be. And that was the greatest miracle of all. Not that her past had been erased, but that her future had become something worth staying for, something worth building, something worth believing in. The frontier could be harsh and unforgiving, but it could also be a place of second chances, a place where people could reinvent themselves and find redemption, a place where broken things could be made whole again through patience, love, and the daily choice to keep going. Elena had arrived at the Callahan Ranch with nothing but fear and desperation. She'd leave it, years from now, at the end of a long and well-lived life, knowing she'd built something that mattered, a family, a legacy, a love that had healed more than just her own wounds. But all of that was still to come. Tonight was just one night among thousands, unremarkable except for the quiet contentment it held. And sometimes that was enough. Sometimes the small moments, lying in your husband's arms, listening to your daughter breathe softly down the hall, knowing tomorrow would bring work you loved and people you cherished, were the ones that mattered most. Elena fell asleep smiling, her hand clasped in Wade's, secure in the knowledge that whatever came next, they would face it together. And that made all the difference.